Chapter 374. I Ching scanned the group of ghosts and was even more shocked. Did these ghosts lose their memories collectively, or did the person who attacked them move so quickly that they did not even have time to react before they died? He asked in detail and realized that not only did they forget how they died, but they also forgot everything that happened when they were alive. They could not even remember their names, so they could only call each other Headless Ghost, Disemboweler Ghost, etc. I Ching's frown deepened. Looking at the number of ghosts, it was obvious that the city had been massacred. The strange thing was that he did not sense any array formation in the city. They did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Why were they trapped here? He looked up at the city gate. There are no restraints on you. Why can't you get out? That's because. Thinking that I Ching did not believe him, the headless ghost panicked, but he did not know how to explain. As if thinking of something, he said, "Exalted immortal, you'll understand once you see it." The ghosts all nodded in agreement. As they spoke, a large group of ghosts swarmed towards the city gates like 100 ghosts walking in the night. Just as they were about to float out of the city, a ghostly shadow flashed. The originally large group of ghosts was reduced by more than half, and they disappeared. The next moment, they appeared in the middle of the main street again. There was no exception. "Exalted immortal, this is it," the ghost said bitterly. "It's not that we don't want to leave, but no matter how we float, we will eventually return to this place. That's right, we can't get out at all. Exalted immortal, we want to reincarnate too. Exalted immortal, your dermic powers are strong. Please save us." I Ching was shocked. This was a transportation array? No, there was no spirit chi at the city gate just now, nor was there any aura of an array formation. "Master." He turned to look at Shining, who was beside him. Shining took a bite of her fruit and answered, "Some kind of enclosed space?" "Enclosed space?" I Ching paused, then suddenly thought of something. "Master, you mean that this place is like a mystic realm, isolated from the outside world?" "Something like that." It was no wonder that the ghosts could not get out. To them, this city was completely isolated from this small world. It was a world of its own, and the city gate was the border. Unless they had the ability to break out of this world, they would only be sent back. And according to what they said, it seemed that it only worked on ghosts. Wait a minute. A thought suddenly struck him. He turned to look at a certain ghost who was hiding far away, hugging a pillar and shivering. The corner of his mouth twitched, and in an instant, a thick layer of coldness covered him. "Go out and try." He pointed at the city gate not far away. Song Ren, who was suddenly called out, was stunned. He saw those evil spirits, each more frightening than the last, looking at him in unison. His entire soul body was like a wave, shaking wave after wave. What? He obviously didn't react in time. I Ching directly pinched a spell, and with a ding sound, a spirit sword instantly fell in front of Song Ren. It sank 3 inches into the ground, and the edge of the sword was suffused with cold air. Startled, Song Ren moved away from the pillar out of reflex, dodging the spirit sword. I Ching, however, did not stop. One by one, the swords formed from spirit chi flew towards him as if they were lining up. With a blood-curdling scream, he turned around and frantically floated in the direction of the city gate. He was forced to rush out of the city gate by the spirit sword. "I'll poke you to death, you little bitch." For all under... He went out. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. Indeed. I Ching's hand turned the spell, and chased after Song Ren's spirit sword, changing its direction and landing in front of him. A certain coward outside the city used the same method to rush all the way back and then stopped. The boundary of this city had no effect on Song Ren. No wonder he could rush to the immortal realm. Song Ren was already so frightened that his soul body curled up like cotton candy. Like a ball, he rolled back to the two of them. When he looked up, he saw the group of evil spirits whose faces had changed beyond recognition, and he trembled again. Subconsciously, he floated towards a certain master and disciple. This time he didn't dare to look for I Ching, and could only stretch out his claws to pull Shining. But before he could reach, I Ching seemed to have sensed it in advance, and with a gaze 10 times colder than before, he instantly stared at him. "Little bitch. What else do you want?" F***CK. I Ching directly took a step to the side, inserted himself between the man and the ghost and picked Song Ren up. At the same time, he conjured a spell to make his soul body more solid. Then he looked at the ghosts and said, "Do any of you recognize him? He used to be from this city." The ghosts were stunned and carefully looked at Song Ren, who was so frightened that his face was beginning to turn green. After a while, they all shook their heads. "Never seen him. We might have known him when he was alive, but we don't remember. Exalted immortal, did he also die in this city? It doesn't look like it at all. That's right, he's much worse than us. He's not even as scary as the hanged ghost. That's right, one look and you can tell that he's the kind of ghost that doesn't do proper work. I Ching's expression darkened. It seemed like he wouldn't be able to get any more information out of them. Originally, he wanted to ask about the cause of Song Ren's death, and investigate why he had so much resentment. He didn't expect that not only did the entire Qinghe County turn into ghosts, but they also lost their memories. Master, how do you think we should deal with these ghosts? I Ching looked at Shening hesitantly. Huh. Shening, who was reaching for a fruit, paused and tilted her head. What do you think? This place is too strange. His expression darkened. We can't keep so many ghosts here forever. I want to put them directly into the river of forgetfulness and send them to the underworld to be reincarnated. Shorty was not here, so they could only send them to the underworld through the river of forgetfulness. All right. Shening, who did not take any fruit from Chef's storage bag, only some pastries, nodded without any objections. She wasn't listening anyway. Chef then turned to look at the ghost. He conjured a seal with both hands. Instantly, a huge array appeared under his feet and spread across the entire ghost city. All the ghosts felt the yin qi in their bodies dissipate. Even their miserable souls started to gradually return to their original state. They were no longer as miserable as before. A gentle force wrapped around them like flowing water. In the next moment, all the ghosts turned into green smoke and floated up. Just as they were about to disappear into the array, their figures flashed and a large number of ghosts returned to the middle of the main street. Even the rebirth array under I Ching's feet shattered. I Ching was shocked. He looked at his own hands in disbelief. What was going on? Why couldn't these ghosts be sent out? Even if this place was isolated, it wasn't like the outer realm which was cut off from the plane. There was no reason why they couldn't enter the river of forgetfulness, unless, his heart sank. He squatted down and placed his palm on the ground to sense for a while. Suddenly he was shocked. He turned to Shening and said, Master, there's no river of forgetfulness underground. Shening tilted her head and suddenly pointed above her head. Might be up there. What? He looked up at the gray sky. He subconsciously opened his assistant's authority to take a look. In midair, a golden river ran through the entire ghost city. The river of forgetfulness was in the sky. Winky face. Chapter 375. What's going on? He tilted his head and looked at the golden color above his head. He saw that after the river of forgetfulness crossed the entire ghost city, it landed at the city gate and returned to normal. Only the section in the city looked like two waterfalls floating in the sky. I Ching had some guesses in his heart. He immediately understood why the ghosts in the city could not get out. He changed his hand seal and the rebirth array appeared under his feet. He waved his hand and the array slowly rose into the sky, enveloping the entire ghost city. In the next moment, the ghosts turned into green smoke again and flew into the river of forgetfulness in the sky, disappearing without a trace. The city that I Ching had already dispelled a round of yin qi. Now that there were no malicious ghosts, the yin qi dissipated and the city returned to the appearance of a deserted city. I Ching turned to look to the side. Song Ren was indeed still there. Shorty said that he could not enter Samsara, but he did not expect that he could not even enter the river of forgetfulness. Master, I guess the river of forgetfulness is the reason why the ghosts in this city cannot get out. He looked at Shening. The dislocation of the river of forgetfulness caused the ghosts to be unable to enter in time. And the city gate was the node of the dislocation of the river of forgetfulness, thus forming a sealed space. That was why the ghosts could not get out. And the living could not enter the river of forgetfulness, so it did not affect them. Song Ren could not enter the river of forgetfulness because of grievous energy, so Lone Moon could come and go as he pleased. I have already temporarily sent these ghosts into the river of forgetfulness above. But to let them return to the underworld, we need to return the river of forgetfulness in time. If the river of forgetfulness could not return, then these ghosts would never be able to reach the underworld. More importantly, the section in the sky was obviously one of the branches of the river of forgetfulness. If left here, it would dry up one day. The other branches that connected to it would also dry up, which would cause even worse effects. Master, do you have a way to let it return to the ground? Shening tilted her head. How about pulling it down? Pull? He hesitated. How to pull? The river of forgetfulness did not have a physical body. No, Master said it could be pulled. That definitely made sense. After thinking for a moment, a gust of spirit chi formed in his hand. In an instant, it condensed into thousands of threads and flew towards the golden river of forgetfulness in the sky. However, the moment the spiritual chi touched the river of forgetfulness, it passed right through it. Indeed, it couldn't touch it. He frowned and subconsciously sensed the assistant imprint on his body. In the next moment, the spiritual energy, which had yet to touch a physical body, suddenly emitted a thump, like the sound of something entering the water. On the surface of the river, a small drop of golden spray instantly splashed. Touch, touch. So this was how the assistant seal was used? Overjoyed, he raised his hand and produced even more spirit threads. They flew into the sky and crossed the entire river, directly binding up half of the river. Then he pulled down forcefully. The sound of water splashing could be heard. The originally calm surface of the river of forgetfulness was instantly stirred up by layers of waves, and its position was also gradually falling downwards. I Ching adjusted his cultivation and pulled harder, causing the golden river to descend even faster. After a quarter of an hour, he finally pulled the dislocated river of forgetfulness back to the ground. The abnormality of the original high and low water levels at the city gate was also restored. The river of forgetfulness in the city began to flow again, and the surface of the river began to shine with a faint golden light. Master, the method you mentioned is indeed useful. I Ching looked at Shining happily. Master indeed. What did she say? From now on there would no longer be ghosts trapped in the city. I Ching heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at Song Ren beside him. He frowned again, but he still did not find out how exactly he died. Master, why don't we go to the nearby town and ask what exactly happened in this city? The dislocation of the river of forgetfulness could at most trap ghosts, but the cause of death of this person in the city was unknown. Perhaps they could find out why Song Ren carried grievous energy. Shining nodded. I Ching was about to fly on his sword when he felt an unfamiliar aura approaching. Someone was coming. He stopped moving. No matter who it was, they were definitely familiar with this ghost city. He decided to stop moving and wait for that person to appear. Indeed, in a short while, a man in a green robe appeared at the city gate, but he did not fly over on his sword. Instead, he seemed to have used a spell that shrank the ground into inches and rushed over. The person first stopped in front of the city gate and looked around in surprise. The ghost chi in this city has actually completely disappeared. The person's face was full of disbelief. Only then did he notice I Ching in the city. Suddenly, he thought of something and his eyes brightened. He made a strange gesture towards him as if it was some kind of etiquette. Then he opened his mouth and said, "Did fellow Taoist purify this evil ghost just now?" Purify? For some reason he did not like this word. He only sent it into the river of forgetfulness for samsara. I Ching frowned but still nodded. The person became even more delighted. Fellow Taoist is so kind. He smiled brightly and seemed to heave a sigh of relief. This ghost city has been causing trouble everywhere for many years. Even the mystic sect could not do anything about it. I did not expect that it would be resolved by fellow Taoist today. He seemed to have thought of something and continued, "I am Tang Han from the Tang family of Qing City. Fellow Taoist Tao skills are so profound. I wonder which family are you from, and how should I address you?" I Ching. He was stunned. He had never heard of such a surname among the mystic cultivator families. Just as he was puzzled, the person stepped aside and continued, "My master, Shining." Tang Han was stunned. He did not notice just now. Only now did he realize that there was actually a woman standing beside him. Surname Shin. His eyes brightened instantly. Could the two of you be from the Shin family of Luoyang? No wonder, although the Shin family was not a big mystic cultivator family, it was also a well-known family for 100 years. When did the Shin family have such an amazing mystic cultivator? He could actually resolve the evil ghost that even the mystic sect could not do anything about. No. I Ching shook his head directly. What Shin family of Luoyang, Tang family of Qing City? Could it be that the cultivators of this small world were all from big families? No. Tang Han, who had guessed wrongly time and time again, was stunned. Then which family are the two of you from? They couldn't be independent cultivators, could they? The master and disciple exchanged a look and then replied in unison. Niu family. To Tang Han. Huh? Which family was the Niu family? Never heard of it. Could it be a hidden big family? Fellow Taoist Tang, do you know what exactly happened in this city? Why are there evil ghosts all over the city? I Ching stepped forward and asked. Tang Han saw that the other party had no intention of explaining his origin in detail, so he did not ask any more. Looking at the deserted city, he sighed and said, "Sigh. Speaking of the people of this Qinghe County, they are really pitiful. Now that the world is chaotic and deviant ghosts run rampant, the residents of this city have suffered from this disaster. Deviant ghosts? I Ching was stunned. He had only heard of deviant beasts and deviant demons. What the hell were these deviant ghosts? Seeing the other party's puzzled face, Tang Han was even more certain that the other party was from a hidden big family. He stepped aside and said, "If you don't mind, can the two of you follow me back to my humble house, and I will tell you in detail?" I Ching looked at Xining beside him. Seeing that she did not object, he cupped his fists and said, "Thank you. Please." Chapter 376. Tang Han brought the two out of the city and walked towards the north. That's right, walk. Originally, he said that his house was in the city, but they walked for nearly an hour straight into a dense forest, and the other party had no intention of stopping. "Fellow Taoist, you've worked hard. My house is in this forest not far, we'll be there in less than an hour," Tang Han said with a natural smile. I Ching, Xining, the two stopped in their tracks. A certain Ning, who had never walked such a long way except for the time when she opened up the plane, had the urge to stick the pastry in her hand on his face. He said it was very close. "Master." Seeming to read her thoughts, I Ching suddenly stepped forward and squatted down in front of her. "Disciple will carry you." "Oh." Xining then kept the pastries in her hands, and leaned on Chef's back in a natural manner. I Ching stiffened for a moment, the heat source that suddenly stuck to his back turned into a warm current, as if flowing to the bottom of his heart. He paused for a while before standing up steadily and walking with Tang Han in front. Tang Han looked at this somewhat strange pair of master and disciple, feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He didn't pay too much attention to it, leading the way in front while introducing the situation in the city to I Ching. The two then learned about the situation of this small world from him. As previously guessed, the spirit chi here was indeed thin, resulting in no so-called immortal cultivation at all, and no immortal cultivation sects, but there were mystic cultivators who practiced mystic techniques. They also used spirit chi to cultivate, but mystic techniques only knew some shallow spells to ward off evil and evil. They didn't pursue the path of immortality like cultivators. I Ching then understood why he had to bring the two along and not directly fly on his sword. It turned out that he didn't know how to fly a sword at all. Looking closely at his cultivation, he was indeed only at the early stage of chi refinement. These mystic cultivators usually only did exorcism and sealing demons, and took it as their duty to protect the peace of the area. They didn't have any thoughts of ascending to immortality. And most of what they dealt with were the deviant ghosts he mentioned. Tang Han said that deviant ghosts were different from ordinary ghosts. They were bloodthirsty by nature, and the more powerful deviant ghosts could devour souls, and they loved to eat living people. In Qinghe County, tens of thousands of people were massacred by the deviant ghosts in one night because of the invasion of the deviant ghosts. Later on, the Taoists of Shenmen had to send out dozens of Taoists to kill the group of deviant ghosts. But because of this, it became a ghost town. The ghost chi in that city is too strong. Tang Han sighed and shook his head. The mystic cultivators and the mystic sects have thought of many ways, but they couldn't purify the ghosts in the city. They could only seal off this area. He led the two of them to a small house in the forest. He invited the two of them to sit down before continuing. "My cultivation level is low. In order to prevent mortals from entering and being harmed, the Tang family sent me to guard this place." I Ching placed a plate of pastries and a cup of tea on the table in front of Xining out of habit. He turned and asked, "Fellow Taoist Tang, apart from the deviant ghosts massacring the city, did anything else happen in the city?" Tang Han thought about it and shook his head. "I haven't heard of it. Why do you ask?" I Ching frowned. "That's not right. If it was just the deviant ghosts massacring the city, why would only Song Ren have such a huge grievance?" He turned to look at Song Ren who had floated along with them. "Fellow Taoist, have you seen this ghost?" "Ghost?" Tang Han was stunned. He looked in the direction he was pointing, but his eyes were not focused. Suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. "Fellow Taoist, do you mean that there are evil ghosts following us out of the city?" His expression changed. He stood up abruptly and turned to take out a peachwood sword from the cabinet beside him. He made a hand seal and shouted, "Bold evil ghosts, you still want to harm people. Show yourself quickly. Heaven and earth are black and yellow, ghosts and spirits are not born. Go." With that said, he directly stabbed the sword towards the cabinet beside Song Ren. With a swoosh, he poked a hole in the cabinet door. Xining, I Ching, Song Ren, after he stabbed with the sword, he heaved a long sigh of relief. He looked around and then turned to Yi Qing. "Fellow Taoist, is the evil ghost that followed us dead? Are you freaking kidding me?" Phew 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 phew. No wonder he didn't look at Song Ren from beginning to end. He couldn't see him at all. How low was his cultivation? The corner of Yi Qing's mouth twitched. He bent his finger and pointed at Tang Han's forehead, guiding the spirit chi in his body to gather in his eyes. Only then did Tang Han see Song Ren. The peachwood sword in his hand tightened. "There's an evil ghost indeed." Yi Qing hurriedly stopped him. "Wait, this ghost is a little special. He's different from those evil ghosts in the city. That's why we brought him with us." "Special?" Tang Han was stunned. He thought of something and then looked enlightened. "Could it be that he's a ghost that the two of you kept? The two of you are indeed skilled in sorcery. You can even command evil ghosts." Sorry. He sheathed his peachwood sword a little embarrassedly. There was indeed a way to subdue ghosts in the mystic techniques. "Yi Qing. As long as you're happy." He touched his eyes, and a trace of excitement flashed across his face. "I wonder what sorcery fellow Taoist used just now. It actually allowed me to see ghosts without the use of external objects." Yi Qing was speechless. Seeing ghosts required external objects? "I mobilized the spirit chi in your body." Tang Han was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes widened abruptly. "Fellow Taoist, you're helping me to open my heavenly eye." He suddenly felt a wave of excitement. His eyes were shining as he looked at Yi Qing. He was indeed an expert. No wonder he could purify the entire ghost city. What the hell was opening the heavenly eye? Yi Qing felt the difficulty of communicating with people who weren't in the same cultivation system. He hurriedly changed the topic. "I wonder what sect is the mystic sect that fellow Taoist mentioned?" "Mystic sect is not a sect." Tang Han smiled. He was even more certain that these two came from a hidden clan. Otherwise, how could they not even know what mystic sect was? Mystic sect is an organization jointly founded by the mystic cultivator clans. Its main purpose is to eliminate deviant ghosts and maintain the righteous path in the world. The elite mystic cultivators of all clans are gathered there. They're all mystic technique masters above the 3rd grade. So it was a place like the immortal alliance of various sections. Tang Han's face was full of yearning. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and said with some excitement, "Oh yes. With your cultivation, it won't be a problem for you to join mystic sect." He just didn't know what grade mystic technique master they were. "Where is mystic sect?" Yi Qing continued. "It's in Longxing City." Tang Han glanced at the two. "The two of you have solved the Qinghe County matter. It's also considered a great merit. If you really intend to join mystic sect, I can write a letter to recommend you." Something flashed in Yi Qing's eyes, but he didn't explain. "Thank you, fellow Taoist." "Don't stand on ceremony, fellow Taoist. It's a great deed for you to solve the Qinghe Ghost City. It's just a small effort on my part. It's only right." With that said, he went straight to the inner chamber, took out a brush and ink and started writing. In less than a moment, he finished writing the letter of recommendation and handed it to Yi Qing. "The nearest town is more than 10 miles away from here. The roads are complicated. Why don't I bring the two of you?" "No need." Before he finished speaking, the master and disciple spoke at the same time. If they walked any further, their legs would break. Why did they feel despised? Chapter 377. Yi Qing didn't say much to Tang Han. After asking for the general direction of the Mystic Gate, he quickly got up and left. He was afraid that he would act on impulse and personally send them to the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Once he left Tang Han's residence, he immediately rode on his sword and flew towards Longxing City with Shening. Tang Han said that Qinghe County was raided by deviant ghosts, which was why it was massacred. These words seemed to be true. The tragic state of the ghosts in the city did not seem to be caused by an ordinary disaster. But the ghosts in the city lost their memories, and the river of forgetfulness was not something that could be done by just deviant ghosts. Although he didn't know what the deviant ghost that Tang Han was talking about was, as long as it was a ghost, except for a special case like Song Rin, as long as it got close to the river of forgetfulness, it would be sent to the underworld for reincarnation. Therefore, the phenomenon of the river of forgetfulness in Qinghe County was definitely not the work of deviant ghosts. Instead, it was more likely to have something to do with the mystic gate that was used to expel deviant ghosts. What had happened in the city at that time? Why would Song Ren have such a big grievance? It seemed that he could only go to the Celestial Sect of Wonders to find out. Tang Han said that Longxing City, where the Celestial Sect of Wonders was located, was tens of thousands of miles away from here, but for flying swords, it was only a quarter or two of an hour. I Ching scanned with his divine perception and saw a huge city in front of him. Compared to other places where the spirit chi was so thin that it could not be seen, the spirit chi there was obviously thicker. However, it still could not compare to the immortal cities of other small worlds. Even his aura was exceptionally chaotic, filled with the aura of mortals. I Ching hesitated for a moment, then turned and landed in a remote place outside the city. He turned around to look at a certain coward who was afraid of heights and frowned. Exalted immortal? Song Rin trembled under his stare, and his heart turned cold for no reason. He had a feeling that ever since they left the ghost city, this immortal surnamed Yi's attitude towards him had worsened. His gaze seemed to be able to freeze him into ice at any moment. You're a ghost, you can't just go in like this. Those so-called mystic cultivators didn't seem to be very friendly to ghosts. If Song Rin went in just like that, he might be beaten to death. To avoid trouble, I'll use an immortal item to create an apparition for you. You can temporarily possess it. As he spoke, he took out a green and juicy green onion from his storage bag. Song Rin, why is it a green onion? Where's the promised immortal item? Aren't you an immortal? Why would he carry things like scallions with him? Let's go in, I Ching said seriously as he shook the green onion that was overflowing with immortal chi. Exalted immortal. The corner of Song Ren's mouth twitched. A moment later he probed, Can we change it? This was intentional, right? Little bitch, you sure have a lot of demands. I Ching's face darkened, he snorted coldly, but still continued to dig into his storage bag. Song Ren heaved a sigh of relief. The next moment he saw I Ching take out a bunch of things from his storage bag. Garlic, chili, chives, pepper, coriander. They're all here. Hurry up and choose one. Shining, Song Ren. Flip's table, this isn't choosing the illusory body, this is choosing the ingredients, right? For all. Ngunguro, however, the other party looked as if he would freeze Song Ren to death with his gaze if he continued to nag. Song Ren, who had always been timid, had no choice but to admit defeat and float forward. He swept a glance at the ingredients on the ground. Unexpectedly, he found one with a different attribute. His eyes lit up instantly. I choose this. He pointed to a white dandelion sandwiched between a handful of coriander. I Ching casually took it out. Nobody knew what he was thinking, but the corner of his mouth twitched. He turned to look at Song Ren. Are you sure? It was obvious that a certain radish had smuggled in. Thank you, exalted immortal. Song Ren nodded vigorously. It was better than garlic and chili. Flowers have always been elegant. I think it will definitely help exalted immortal to create a good illusory body. I Ching did not speak. He gave him an indecipherable look. Even Xin Ying, who was focused on eating her fruit, turned back to look at him in surprise. What's the matter? Song Ren's heart turned cold for no reason. Was the dandelion bad? Then I'll take this. I Ching had no intention of explaining at all. He directly conjured a seal and trapped Song Ren's soul into the dandelion. With a wave of his hand, an array appeared under his feet. The dandelion immediately turned into a white light and flew into the array. The white light became brighter and began to condense. In a short while, a youth who looked to be about 16 or 17 years old appeared in the array. He was dressed in a green and white robe. Unsurprisingly, he looked 70 to 80% similar to the radish. I have a body. Song Ren looked at his own body excitedly. He was indeed an immortal. He had turned back into a human. This is just an illusory body. I Ching explained, don't go too far away from us. Otherwise, once the immortal chi in the dandelion is used up, you will immediately return to your original state. I understand. Song Ren nodded and hurriedly cupped his hands in salute. Thank you, exalted immortal. Let's enter the city. He glanced at him again. His eyes stopped at the lower half of his body. Then he turned and habitually pulled Xin Ying into the city. Song Ren immediately followed. The city was very lively. There were people everywhere. I Ching originally thought that this would be similar to the immortal cities of cultivators. But the strange thing was that more than half of the city was filled with mortals without any cultivation. Normally, cultivators would not easily mix with mortals to avoid being contaminated by the vulgar atmosphere of the mortal world, which was not conducive to cultivation. But here there seemed to be no such concept at all. It was especially down-to-earth. I Ching inquired about the location of the Mystic Gate. Then he brought the two of them all the way into the city. Along the way, many people beside him were carrying peachwood swords similar to Tang Han's, or swords that were strung together with copper coins. There was a faint flow of spirit chi on them, but it was extremely weak. It was not even a level 1 Dharma artifact. It seemed that they were also mystic cultivators who wanted to join the mystic gate. The few of them walked through the main street. From afar they saw a palace floating in the city. But that palace was not very big. Perhaps because of the thin spirit chi, it was only floating 4 to 5 meters above the ground. But it looked quite magnificent. On the horizontal board of the palace there were 2 big golden words, Mystic Gate. There was a very big square in front of the palace. There were already hundreds of people gathered there. There was also a platform in the middle of the square as if waiting for something. I Ching looked around and took out Tang Han's recommendation letter. He was about to go forward and give it to the person who seemed to be in charge. But suddenly he heard a deep voice coming from the platform. "Thank you, fellow Taoists, for coming here from afar to support my mystic gate in expelling deviant ghosts." A middle-aged man in a green robe came up the platform. The square was suddenly silent. They all looked at the platform. "The situation is urgent. Please forgive me for not being able to entertain you one by one." Sect Mastering, what exactly happened? As soon as he finished speaking, someone below asked anxiously, "Why did you suddenly send out the Mystic Iron Order and urgently gather all the mystic cultivators here?" This was the first time since the establishment of the Mystic Gate. "This concerns the catastrophe of the world. I have no choice." The sect master, whose surname was Ing, stepped forward and looked at the square with a heavy expression. A few days ago, the sect received news that a large number of deviant ghosts appeared in the southwest. The Mystic Gate tried many times to stop them but to no avail. Now the deviant ghosts have broken through Moonfall City and are coming here. They will reach Longxing City in less than 3 days. Chapter 378. As soon as he said that, there was an uproar and anxiety appeared on everyone's faces. It was not a common occurrence for deviant ghosts to attack a city, not to mention that they were attacking Moonfall City. That was the city with the most mystic cultivators other than Longxing City. There were at least dozens of mystic cultivators, if not hundreds. So many people failed to stop them who knew how many deviant ghosts had come. Sect Mastering, now that the deviant ghosts are attacking, how should we deal with them? Please instruct us. Someone responded and the others also voiced their support. Yes. Longxing City is the last line of defense. After this, the deviant ghosts will go straight to the capital, and the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. That's right, we must not let them pass, expel the deviant ghosts and protect our country. We dare to come here, we are already prepared to sacrifice ourselves. Please instruct us, Sect Master. For the righteous path of the world, we will die honorably. Everyone's expression was extremely serious. It was clear that they were not just shouting slogans but really prepared to die. Even I Ching was a little surprised. Such fearlessness to protect the righteous path of the world was probably difficult even for the immortal sections. It was indeed admirable. Thank you, fellow Taoists. Sect Master Ing glanced at everyone with a moved expression. Yesterday, our mystic sect disciples rushed to Moonfall to stop the deviant ghosts, but the battle situation is not clear. The mystic cultivators of 3rd grade and above have all rushed to Moonfall City for support. Now that Longxing City has no combat power, and Moonfall City has fallen, I hope that fellow Taoists can help us defend the city. Everyone nodded. That sect master Ing gave a few more instructions and made some arrangements before letting everyone go forward to register so that they could be assigned. Master. I Ching subconsciously looked at Shen Ing beside him. Now that the deviant ghosts had attacked the city, they must not be in the mood to take in disciples. As for Qinghe County, he probably would not be able to ask about it for a while. However, he was a little curious about the so-called deviant ghosts. Are we going to register? Sure. Shen Ing nodded, having no objections. I Ching then followed the crowd to register their names, and received a wooden plate with the word Xian written on it. On the stage, sect leader Ing arranged everyone's positions and discussed how to deal with the enemy. Only then did the crowd slowly disperse. Because the deviant ghosts would only arrive in 3 days, Shen Ing and the others had to stay in the city first. Moreover, it was almost noon and it was time for lunch. I Ching was thinking about what to do for lunch as he walked into an inn. However, he discovered a crucial problem. What is this? The innkeeper took the spirit stones that I Ching handed over, looking confused. He smiled politely and reminded him, "Sir, our inn does not accept bartering. Do you have any silver on you?" Shen Ing, I Ching, Song Ren, only then did they remember that this was a mortal city that used gold and silver. It was completely different from the cultivator's currency. After leaving Father Nyo, master and disciple once again felt the crisis of having no money. "Master, don't worry. There are many empty spaces outside the city. It's just building a residence. It's just a small Dharma spell. We can start cooking soon, I Ching, who had been invited out of the inn, said seriously. But, to prevent deviant ghosts, the city gate was closed just now, Song Ren reminded him weakly. Then let's find a house. The people here are simple and honest. We're just borrowing the kitchen. I think they won't reject us. I Ching immediately changed his words. The mystic sect is already evacuating the civilians in the city. Everyone is busy moving. Who would be in the mood to borrow your kitchen? I still have some pastries in my storage bag. Why don't we give them to the innkeeper in exchange for a kitchen? The innkeeper said just now that he doesn't accept bartering. I Ching, Shining, she instantly turned to stare at a certain coward. Her eyes were as cold as ice. Did you come specially to undermine me? Song Ren trembled and immediately moved behind Shining. You won't let the ghost speak the truth? You have a way. Shining suddenly turned to look at him. There. Song Ren stiffened. His gaze drifted. Just as he was about to shake his head, he saw I Ching's expression. If you dare to say no, I'll kill you. He immediately shrank his head. I think so. The two of them paused and looked over. Why don't we? Let's go dig under that big tree. He suddenly pointed to a secluded street corner. They could vaguely see the lush foliage. I think there might be something we need there. What did he mean? I Ching and Shining exchanged a look. They turned and walked in the direction he pointed. Indeed, they saw a big tree after turning the corner. It should be 3 inches to the right of the tree. He spoke again. I Ching frowned. He squatted down at the place Song Ren pointed to. He used his divine perception to scan. Indeed, there was something underneath. He directly used an earth elemental sorcery. In an instant, the soil under his feet turned outwards. A brown porcelain jar suddenly emerged from the soil. He opened it to take a look. It was actually filled with silver ingots. There was a layer of black spots on the silver ingots. It looked like it had been there for many years. How do you know that there's something buried under this tree? I Ching turned to look at Song Ren doubtfully. The other party was stunned. He seemed to recall this question. A look of confusion flashed across his eyes. After a while he shook his head. I don't know either. I just suddenly had a feeling that there would be silver under this tree. Could it be that his memory was recovering? Do you remember anything else? He thought for a while, then shook his head. No. I Ching's expression darkened. Song Ren did not look like he had recovered. Could it be because his illusion was a dandelion that Radish had bloomed? Radish was a vegetation spirit. It could communicate with plants. It was normal for it to know that there would be silver under this tree. Exalted Immortal, is this enough? Song Ren asked seriously. If it's not enough, there's more under the tree in front. Well, yes. There's also the old well in the east of the city, the old temple in the west of the city, and the backyard of the shop in the north of the city. I Ching, Shining, she felt that ever since this coward got his illusion, did he awaken some incredible skill? He could turn into a treasure hunter or something. There's no need. I Ching took out a piece of silver from the jar and buried the jar back into the soil. He subconsciously refined the silver in his hand and removed the layer of black spots on it. Then he stood up and glanced at him with an unclear meaning. After a while, he patted his shoulder and said, if Father Nyo was here, he would probably want to take you in as his disciple. Song Ren hesitated. Who was Father Nyo? He was also an immortal? Did he mean that he had the potential to become an immortal? He felt a surge of excitement in his heart. Just as he was about to ask, I Ching added, it's a pity that he didn't come. You probably won't see him in the future. Then what the hell are you talking about? You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Chapter 379. With Song Ren, the treasure-seeking ghost, the few of them successfully checked into the inn. They stayed in the inn for 2 days. The commoners in the city had already moved out of Longxing City one after another. The originally lively city suddenly became deserted. Except for the mystic cultivators who occasionally came out to patrol, there were no mortals without any cultivation. Following the arrangement of the mystic sects, I Ching went out twice these 2 days, both to strengthen the defense outside the city. He then understood the difference between these so-called mystic cultivators and cultivators. They seemed to be more inclined towards talisman cultivators. Besides using those peachwood swords that did not have much power, they used talismans the most. And the so-called strengthening of the defense outside the city was just pasting all kinds of low-level talismans outside the city gates. The corner of I Ching's mouth twitched as he watched. If those so-called deviant ghosts were really large enough to attack the city. These low-level talismans obviously could not even hold for a quarter of an hour, but everyone looked serious and serious. Considering their cultivation, I Ching could only set up a mountain-protecting array around the city gates when they were not paying attention. He became more and more curious about what those so-called deviant ghosts were. I Ching did not wait for long. On the second night he sensed something strange. Something was coming this way, bringing with it a sky full of yin qi. It was clearly still 100 miles away, but the temperature in the city dropped sharply. Exalted Immortal? Song Ren looked at I Ching, who suddenly stood up and gave him a puzzled look. After a while, he thought of something and suddenly widened his eyes. Is it a deviant ghost? Yes. I Ching nodded. Song Ren looked flustered and turned to walk toward Shen Ying's room. Then I'll go wake Exalted Immortal Shen. Come back. I Ching reacted quickly and pulled her back. Master is asleep. Ha! Song Ren was stunned. And then? If we wake her up now, Longxing City will really not be able to defend. What did he mean? I Ching had no intention of explaining. He picked him up and flew out of the city on his sword. Once out of the city, the yin qi in the air became even stronger. From afar they could see a black mass in front of them, even covering the moonlight. The surrounding yin qi was blowing and it was bone-chilling. The mystic cultivators patrolling in the city did not seem to notice these changes. I Ching sent a stream of spiritual qi over and said, "The deviant ghosts are here." That mystic cultivator was stunned. He looked around and did not see anyone, but he still turned around to inform the others. I Ching didn't care much about it and directly flew towards the direction where the yin qi was gathering. Not long after, all kinds of mournful ghost cries could be heard. Only then did I Ching see the appearance of the so-called deviant ghost. It was a black fog so dense that it was almost as black as ink. It even had a bit of demonic aura to it. One could clearly hear the ear-piercing screams of ghosts, but they couldn't see the actual entity. There were only one or two vague ghostly figures flashing past. Moreover, the range of the black fog was so large that it covered half of the forest. His speed was also extremely fast. Wherever he passed, the plants withered. I Ching was stunned by the scene in front of him. It was as simple as many ghosts glued together. From the looks of it, rather than calling it a group of deviant ghosts, it would be more accurate to call it one. He flew down directly and a barrier array was formed instantly. The black fog that was originally pouncing towards Longxing City was blocked. Those mournful cries became even more piercing. I Ching took a step forward and released his divine perception to investigate. There were indeed many souls gathered in this black fog, but the soul bodies were extremely thin. He could only faintly see one or two faint soul bodies floating past, and there were even a few similar ones. These were remnant souls. His eyes widened abruptly. In this black fog, what gathered were actually all remnant souls. There wasn't a single complete soul. What was going on? By right, remnant souls were extremely weak. They would dissipate upon contact with a bit of immortal spirit qi, and they would only be sensed by the main body. But the remnant souls here were obviously not like that. They clearly had no consciousness at all, yet they gathered in groups. Their attack power was not weaker than that of evil ghosts. And this number, from a rough look, was more than tens of thousands. So many remnant souls gathered on their own instead of returning to the main body? Unless, they didn't have a main body at all. But remnant souls didn't have consciousness. Why did they come here? He carefully scanned the black fog. After a while, he saw a trace of a different aura with a sense of malevolence. Grievance. They were affected by the grievance, just like Song Ren, who rushed into the immortal world. Song. He subconsciously turned back to look at Song Ren, who had been silent all this while. But he found that Song Ren's body suddenly began to emit a gray aura. In a short while it covered his entire body. That pair of usually timid and frightened eyes surged with violence, and both eyes were red. He was affected by the grievance in the black fog. Song Ren. I Ching yelled. But he seemed to not hear it. The grievance on his body became heavier and his expression became more and more sinister. Kill. Kill. He murmured. In the next moment he directly broke away from the illusory body. In an instant he changed back into the appearance of the immortal world filled with grievance. He turned into a black ball and directly rushed towards the black fog of remnant souls. Song Ren. I Ching panicked. He directly conjured a seal and a stream of spirit qi flew out. It wrapped around Song Ren, who had been completely swallowed by the grievance, and forcibly pulled him back. He set up 4 or 5 layers of sealing spells in succession. But Song Ren seemed to have completely lost his mind. He began to attack the array around him crazily. His already weak soul body became even thinner. Mengpo was not here, so his grievance could not be eliminated. I Ching's face darkened. He had no choice but to seal him back into the illusory body on the ground. He conjured a few more spells to slowly suppress his grievance. The mystic cultivators in the city also rushed over at this time. They saw the black fog in the sky at one glance. Deviant ghosts, they really came. Everyone's face turned pale. Dispel deviant ghosts. No one knew who shouted. The mystic cultivators did not even look carefully. They all raised the peachwood swords in their hands and rushed towards the opposite side. They were about to pass through the blocking array that I Ching had set up. I Ching's heart sank. Don't go over. It was too late. The array that he had just set up could only isolate ghosts. Could not block living people. When he sealed Song Ren back into the illusory body, the other side had already rushed in. With a crisp sound, a gap suddenly appeared in the transparent array. Large amounts of black fog rushed out and rushed straight towards the crowd. The few people who were closest to it did not have time to take out their talismans. Instantly, all the blood chi in their bodies broke out. They turned into dried corpses in an instant. Their vitality dissipated. I Ching was full of anger. He wanted to imitate Father Nyo and scold. Holy shit. He turned his hand. Just as a sword chi was about to slash over, a chanting suddenly came from the sky. Immeasurable heavenly lord. As soon as he finished speaking, a clear spirit chi swept over from behind. It instantly dispelled the thick black chi and directly forced those remnant souls back into the array. A golden array suddenly appeared in midair. The golden light shone brightly and turned into a layer of translucent golden arc. It directly enveloped the black fog below. A Taoist dressed in green walked over from behind. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand. He had a benevolent look on his face. He only took 2 or 3 steps, but he was already in front of the crowd. I Ching instantly saw through his cultivation. He was slightly shocked. Soul formation stage. There was actually a soul formation stage cultivator in this small world. More importantly, there was a layer of thick and somewhat dazzling golden light surrounding him. He looked like a moving luminous body. This was the light of merit. Chapter 380. Master Yun Tian. Everyone was shocked and then overjoyed. That's great, Master Yun Tian is here. Longxing City is saved this time. He is indeed the world's #1 mystic cultivator. With him around, there is no deviant ghost that cannot be solved. I didn't expect to see Master Yun Tian again. This trip was not in vain. Didn't Heaven Master go into seclusion decades ago? Could he have come specially for Longxing City? Everyone heaved a sigh of relief and rushed forward with excited looks on their faces. Even I Ching looked over curiously. Only people with great merit would have the light of merit around them, but it was the first time he saw one as bright as this one. Even the Buddhist cultivators in other small worlds who cultivated with merit did not have as much merit as this one. But he was a cultivator. No. According to this small world, he should be a mystic cultivator. How many good deeds did he have to do to have such a thick light of merit? I Ching could not help but feel a sense of admiration. And the person in the middle who was covered in the light of merit only smiled at everyone kindly, cupped his fists and said, "Fellow Taoists, Yun Heng is late." Only then did everyone react and return the greeting with extremely respectful expressions. Some even rubbed their eyes in disbelief, thinking that they had seen wrongly. After a while, the sect master whose surname was Ing stepped forward. "Master Yun Tian, are you here for this deviant ghost?" "Yes." Yun Heng nodded and said, "I sensed a gathering of Yin Qi in the middle of my seclusion, so I specially rushed over." He turned to look at the few dried corpses on the ground, and a trace of pity flashed in his eyes. It seems that I was still one step too late and did not save them. He raised his hand to conjure a seal and waved the horsetail whisk in his hand. A golden light swept towards the corpses on the ground. Immediately, the dried corpses on the ground turned into spots of light and disappeared. He chanted the Tao Sutra a few more times before sighing and putting down his hand. With this reminder, everyone also thought of their companions who had just sacrificed themselves. At once, they fell silent, and their eyes revealed a sorrowful expression. After a while, Sect Master Ing said, Heaven Master has tried his best. I'm sure they know in the underworld and will not blame you. What's more, they died to save the world. It's a worthy death." He sighed and turned to look at the deviant ghosts that were covered by the golden light. His face darkened. "We didn't expect that there would be so many deviant ghosts this time. Our dermic powers are weak and I'm afraid we cannot dispel them all. I wonder if Heaven Master has a way? Once he finished speaking, everyone present turned to look at Yun Heng. Actually, everyone was clear that they could not deal with so many deviant ghosts. One Yun Heng. The moment they saw the deviant ghosts, they were ready to sacrifice themselves. Even if they could stop them for a while, it would be good. But Yun Heng was a Heaven Master, the strongest mystic cultivator according to legend. With him around, perhaps, they could really get rid of it. He Yun he Heng and Yun he Yun comma Heng 11111 Master, Yun he comma Yun 1111 Yun Tian, 1. He sighed and turned to look at the black swarm of deviant ghosts behind him. I will try my best. I wonder if everyone can protect me. Everyone's expression darkened. Even Master Heaven was not confident. It showed how serious the deviant ghosts were this time. But in the current situation they could only try their best. This concerns all life in the world. Heaven Master Yin, just try. We will do our best to protect you. Alright, thank you everyone. Yun Heng nodded and took a step forward. He took out a purple dermic talisman and muttered something. A moment later the talisman lit up. The other mystic cultivators all stood around him to protect him. The light of the talisman grew brighter and brighter. A moment later, it turned into a beam of purple light and flew above the array, trapping the deviant ghosts. An array pattern appeared in the air, slowly expanding. He seemed to be trying to use the array to cover the entire swarm of deviant ghosts. But perhaps because of the different cultivation methods, it took a lot of effort for him to maintain it. A moment later, beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. I Ching looked over and realized that the spirit chi in his body was being continuously transferred to the array in the air. It was as if he was not afraid of wasting it. Half of his spirit chi was used up in an instant. He frowned. If this went on, even if he was a soul formation cultivator, his spirit chi would be used up in a few minutes. He suddenly became curious about the array in the air. What kind of array would require a soul formation cultivator to use up all his energy? After looking at it carefully for a while, he still could not recognize what kind of array it was. Indeed, a moment later Yun Heng's face was already pale. The spirit chi in his body was almost used up. If not for the golden light of merit all over his body, he might not have been able to hold on. All the mystic cultivators present held their breaths and focused their attention on the array formation in the sky. Finally, the purple array expanded to cover the entire swarm of deviant ghosts below. Only then did Yun Heng turn his hand and use the last bit of spirit energy he had left to change a Dharma spell. The incantation in his mouth became even more complicated. Even the light of merit on his body seemed to dim for a moment. In the next moment, the purple array suddenly changed. The pattern changed instantly. The entire sky turned into a blinding red light. With a thick murderous aura, it directly fell down. This was the soul-destroying array. I Ching's eyes widened. He saw that the array was about to fall down on the remnant souls below. Even the golden shield that originally trapped the deviant ghosts was shattered. The barrier array that he set up inside was also about to collapse. His heart tightened. Subconsciously, he sent a few streaks of sword chi towards the soul-destroying array. In the next moment he heard a loud ding. That red array collapsed instantly, turning into spots of fluorescent light that fell down. And Yun Heng, who set up the array, had already used up all his spirit chi. Now that the array backfired, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell down. What are you doing? It was only then that the other mystic cultivators noticed I Ching at the side. They reacted instantly and turned to look angrily at the person who suddenly broke the array. There were even more people who took out the peachwood swords in their hands and surrounded him tightly. Who are you? Why did you break Master Heaven's array? You stopped us from exorcising deviant ghosts and injured Master Heaven. What exactly do you want? I Ching frowned. He ignored everyone's questions and turned to look at Yun Heng, who was on the verge of collapsing. In a low voice he asked, "Your so-called exorcism is to kill these remnant souls?" Once he said this, everyone became even angrier. Of course, deviant ghosts harm the world. Naturally they have to be exorcised. I Ching's frown deepened. There's no need to talk to him. Take down this traitor who broke the exorcism array. Sect Master Ing, who was leading the group, shouted. The angry crowd looked as if they were about to raise their swords and slash at him. Wait. Yun Heng suddenly spoke, stopping everyone who was rushing over. Wait a minute. Chapter 381. Yun Heng forced himself to take 2 steps forward. He looked at I Ching suspiciously. Something flashed across his eyes as he said anxiously, Fellow Taoist, do you mean that you have other ways to deal with deviant ghosts? I Ching's expression darkened. These deviant ghosts are obviously formed from tens of thousands of remnant souls. The remnant soul is also a part of the soul. Do you know that under the soul extinguishing array the soul will scatter? These tens of thousands of souls will never be reincarnated. The more he spoke, the angrier he became. He had thought that with the light of merit, he would not be an evil person. Who would have thought that he would want to kill tens of thousands of remnant souls? Not to mention cultivators, even the devil race would not dare to do such a thing. However, the crowd didn't care at all. Instead, they looked at him even more furiously. What remnant soul? His soul would scatter and scatter. What a load of nonsense. That's right. If the deviant ghosts aren't eliminated, the living will be eaten. Don't try to mislead us with your lies. We are doing this to protect the righteous path of the world. Master Yin Tian, there's no need to listen to this nonsense. Let's just take down this evil person first. No. Yun Heng once again stood in front of everyone. There was no anger on his face, only excitement. He looked at I Ching with glowing eyes and said urgently, according to fellow Taoist, how should we deal with these deviants? No, these remnant souls? A trace of surprise flashed across I Ching's heart. He kept feeling that something was wrong. He frowned and said, naturally, it will be returned to the river of forgetfulness and sent to the underworld to be reincarnated. Reincarnation? Rebirth? Yun Heng paused, his eyes full of confusion. He was about to ask. I Ching had already turned around and was walking toward the deviant ghosts. He conjured a seal with both hands and golden light shone from beneath his feet. In an instant, a huge reincarnation array appeared on the ground, extending across the entire forest. The originally pitch-black deviant ghost was like a cloud that had been blown away, the black gas dissipating. Even the yin chi of the ghosts had disappeared. Suddenly, one transparent shadow after another appeared in front of him. However, they looked extremely weak. Some of them couldn't even take on a human form, only a cloud of white smoke. They were densely packed together. At first glance, there were actually more than 10,000 of them. Everyone present was stunned and looked at the large number of shadows in disbelief. What is this? Why did the deviant ghost suddenly become like this? Did he become a ghost? But why is there no yin chi? Isn't that the head of the Yen family? Isn't he dead? Everyone gasped in unison as if they had never seen such a scene before. Just as they were about to take a closer look, I Ching made a hand seal. Immediately, the forest of weak remnant souls turned into wisps of green smoke and returned to the river of forgetfulness below. In less than the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, the deviant ghosts that had originally swarmed over in an overwhelming manner and could almost destroy the entire Longxing city had now completely disappeared, leaving only withered branches and withered leaves on the ground. I Ching used his divine perception to scan the entire forest. There was not a single remnant soul left. It seemed like Song Ren was the only special one. The grievances of the other ghosts were not so thick that they could not enter the river of forgetfulness. All the mystic cultivators present were stunned, and no one spoke for a long time. Yun Heng was the first to react. He quickly stepped forward. Fellow Taoist, those strange remnant souls, where did they go? Send it to. Before he could finish, he suddenly paused and looked up at the glimmer of light in the sky. It's daybreak. There's no time. I have to go back to cook. What? With that said, he directly grabbed a certain dandelion apparition on the ground, turned around and with a whoosh he disappeared, leaving behind the crowd, whose eyes were even wider, and the dumbfounded Yun Heng. Nothing was more important than going back to prepare breakfast for Master Carrot, in a certain inn in Longxing City. That's what happened. I Ching tidied up the table as he recounted what happened last night. Xining, who had finally finished her breakfast, turned her chopsticks upside down, squatted on the ground, and poked a certain cowardly corpse. So, his illness is acting up again? Acting up? I Ching was stunned for a moment, and then nodded hard. Yes. Perhaps he was affected by the grievances of those remnant souls. He continued to explain. This time his grievances are even more than before. I have already sent a message to Meng Pa, but perhaps even she might not be able to clear these grievances. Xining glanced at the person on the ground, whose entire body was emitting black qi as if he was moldy. Is there no other way? I haven't found out about his past and I don't know what the knot in Song Ren's heart is. So there's no way to completely eliminate the grievances. Then we throw him away for now? I can only temporarily seal him in the apparition. but the grievances devour the soul. In the long run his soul will completely disappear. So troublesome. Xining tilted her head. Why don't we throw him back to Father Nyo? I Ching was stunned for a moment, and then reminded her seriously. It's not that we can't let Father Nyo deal with it, but we haven't found Yu Hong yet. If we go back now, I guess we won't even have our living expenses for the next 3 months. I Ching continued. If Song Ren doesn't recover by tomorrow, we won't have money to stay in the inn. Xining stiffened, and then threw away the chopsticks in her hand, stood up, and patted I Ching on the shoulder. Chef, you're right. The treasure-seeking ghost has been with us for a few days. We are loyal people. Even if he becomes a moldy ghost, we won't give up on him. Moldy ghost? What the hell? But his mold is quite serious. Xining looked at the person on the ground who was emitting more and more black qi and scratched her head. Why don't we pull him out and shake him and let him dry to get rid of the mold or something? With that said, she bent down directly from the apparition on the ground and pulled out Song Ren, who was full of grievances. She held a corner of it in one hand and shook it up and down against the window like she was shaking a quilt. For a moment, there was only the sound of a gust of wind, and a good ball of grievances was shaken into a rectangle. Straight face, Master. I Ching frowned and was a step too slow to stop her. Song Ren's body is filled with grievances you can't shake. It's shaken off. Before he finished speaking, he saw a large patch of grievances, like a shell being shed, instantly shed off Song Ren's body. That works too. It's done. Xining shook it for less than 2 minutes, and the ball of grievances had already disappeared, revealing a translucent soul inside, but it still had not woken up, and there was still some black in the soul. Take it again and just dry it. I Ching, no? Master indeed. I Ching was about to say something, but the waiter suddenly knocked on the door from outside. Guest, Master Yun Tian asked me to pass a message. He wants to see you. I wonder if it's convenient for you? Master Yun Tian? That's fast. Master, he's the soul formation cultivator I was talking about just now, I Ching explained and then nodded, asking the waiter to invite him in. Oh. Xining did not mind. After a while, she saw a large patch of golden light moving towards the room. It was so bright that it was blinding. Xining was stunned and subconsciously narrowed her eyes. What a big light bulb. She looked down at the moldy ghost in her hand. Greater than over equal to 4 all. Chapter 382. Fellow Taoist. The moment Yun Heng entered, he bowed towards I Ching. He looked excited. Please forgive me for my intrusion, fellow Taoist. I Ching glanced at him. He had guessed that he would find his way here, but he did not expect it to be so soon. It seemed like his position among the mystic cultivators was indeed extraordinary. Don't stand on ceremony, Master Yun Tian. Please take a seat. He gestured for him to come in and sit down. Coincidentally, he had something to confirm with him. Fellow Taoist, you can just call me Yun Heng. He became even more polite and respectful. How should I address you, fellow Taoist? I Ching answered and turned to look behind him. My master, Xining. Yun Heng seemed to have just noticed Xining behind him. He paused for a moment, then immediately bowed. Thinking of the purpose of this trip, he did not think too much about it. He continued to stare at I Ching and said, Fellow Taoist, I came here this time because I have something important to confirm with you. Fellow Taoist, please tell me the truth. His expression became even more nervous, as if what he was going to say next was extremely important to him. His hands subconsciously clenched at his sides. I Ching glanced at him and nodded. Fellow Taoist, please ask away. He took a deep breath, sat up straight and said, What do you mean by remnant souls? Humans are divided into 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, called the soul. When the body dies, the soul emerges as a ghost. A remnant soul is also a fragment of a soul. Because it is incomplete, it is not enough to form a soul or a spirit, so it is called a remnant soul. Then what do you mean by sending me into the river of forgetfulness? He asked anxiously. The river of forgetfulness is the place where all souls in the world are born and end. It flows through every corner of the 3 realms and 6 paths, and it draws the souls of all living beings into the netherworld. Only through the river of forgetfulness can one be reborn and reincarnated. Yun Heng's face paled as if he had suffered a huge blow. His body swayed and his entire body leaned forward as if he was about to fall. However, he used his hands to support himself on the table and tried his best to sit up straight. Many complicated emotions flashed across her eyes. After a while, she looked at I Ching with an even more anxious expression. Then the Dharma spell that fellow Taoist used just now was formation, rebirth, formation. Rebirth? Formation. He muttered these words and looked him up and down. Please forgive me for being presumptuous, but fellow Taoist is using the profound technique. No. Then, sorcery, immortal cultivation sorcery. Immortal cultivation. He was shocked. That's you, a cultivator? Yun Heng was stunned. He was completely stunned. Although he did not know what a cultivator was, he understood that it was completely different from mystic cultivators. His expression changed a few times and after a while he seemed to understand something. So, it's like this. There's actually such a spell in this world. It turns out that we've been using the wrong method all this time. No wonder, no wonder. He sighed and shook his head. For a moment, it was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing. I Ching frowned and looked at him before saying, Fellow Taoist Yun, can you answer some of my questions as well? Yun Heng turned around. Fellow Taoist, please speak. Have you mystic cultivators always destroyed the souls of deviant ghosts? Yun Heng froze for a moment. He suddenly felt a little ashamed. A moment later, he smiled bitterly and said, I know what fellow Taoist wants to say. But in this world, other than expelling them, there is no other way to deal with ghosts. No other way. I Ching was shocked. Expelling the dead and reincarnating, weren't these the most basic spells? He sighed as if thinking of something. After a while he continued, Fellow Taoist, you might not know this, but a few hundred years ago, deviant, remnant souls suddenly appeared in this world. It led to great suffering. At that time no one knew how to deal with these remnant souls. As a result, tens of thousands of civilians in several cities in the north were eaten to death. After that, Patriarch Pu Xian spent tens of years before creating that expelling array to stop those deviant ghosts from wreaking havoc in the world. After that, he even died because of this array. From then on, the mystic cultivators united and built the mystic sect. His expression became even more solemn. He took a deep breath before continuing, the mystic sect made this array public, and its mission was to expel deviant ghosts and protect the world. By expelling all the deviant ghosts to the north, they were able to protect a piece of pure land. So the mystic cultivators in the world only knew this one method. Are you all retarded? There's clearly something wrong with this method. But after many years, the number of deviant ghosts did not decrease. And the number grew bigger and bigger every time. Now it seems, our understanding of it from the beginning was wrong. These deviant ghosts? No, these remnant souls do not need to be expelled but to be reborn. Nonsense. He turned to look at I Ching, cupped his fists and pleaded seriously, Fellow Taoist, I beg you, can you teach the art of rebirth to all the mystic cultivators in the world? Help the world to completely solve this crisis, and help those remnant souls to enter samsara again. I Ching rubbed his forehead. Although he had some guesses before, he did not expect this to be the reason. It turned out that the reason why they showed no mercy to those remnant souls was not because they were cruel, but because they did not know that those were also a part of the soul. What was even more ridiculous was that they claimed to be mystic cultivators who specialized in dealing with ghosts, but actually did not know any way to be reborn, and could only kill them directly. He immediately thought of that soul-exterminating array. Yun Heng had merit on him. That array could indeed exterminate and devour souls. But looking at the cultivation of the others, even if they joined forces, they would probably only be able to unleash 1/10 of the power of that array. At most, they would be able to disperse those remnant souls. But the remnant souls still did not enter the river of forgetfulness. Because of grievous energy they would still reunite. Presumably, this was also the reason why the number of deviant ghosts in this small world had been increasing for so many years. So all this was because their cultivation techniques were incomplete or even seriously lacking. Logically speaking, the different small world spirit chi levels were different, but in the end, they would all be on the path of immortal cultivation and ascension. But this world seemed to have missed something halfway and it was getting more and more crooked. I can teach you, I Ching said in a low voice. Not only the rebirth array but also various methods of rebirth for ghosts. Yun Heng's expression was one of joy and excitement. But, I Ching added, you have to ask all the mystic cultivators to stop using that soul-exterminating array immediately. Of course. He hurriedly nodded. Ever since he knew that those deviant ghosts were also souls, he did not intend to let them use it anymore. Also, can you let me see how your so-called mystic techniques work? Alright, this is a huge matter to save the world. I think everyone will agree. Thank you, fellow Taoist E. I will inform Sect Master Ing to recall all the mystic sect disciples. Also, all the mystic cultivator clans will all rush over within 3 days and spread the news to all the mystic cultivators in the world. Go. Fellow Taoist I Ching. I have one last question. Speak. May I ask? He suddenly pointed above his head, and then turned back to look at the person behind him. Since I entered the door, why has this lady behind me been holding a piece of gray cloth above my head? I Ching, Shining, I've been discovered. My invisibility function is not working today. The moldy ghost has not even dried up yet. Oh. Chapter 383. Yunheng was very fast. The next day he brought over a pile of mystic sect classics. I Ching had thought that there would be all kinds of cultivation techniques. He did not expect that they would all be drawings of talismans. There were small talismans like the dust-repelling talisman and the speed-increasing talisman. There were also big talismans like the thunder talisman and the fire talisman. I want to know how your cultivation techniques are different from mine. You only need to show me the most basic techniques? I Ching thought that he had misunderstood and reminded him again. But, these are all. Yunheng nodded. All the talisman techniques and the mystic techniques are here. I Ching looked at the books on the table. Don't you have anything like guiding qi into the body? Yunheng was stunned. What is guiding qi into the body? I Ching suddenly had a bad feeling. Have you never guided spirit qi into the body? Spirit qi? Yunheng was even more confused. Then how do you usually draw talismans? He changed the way he asked. Oh, you just have to sense the heaven and earth. I'll draw it for you. As he spoke, he immediately took out the talisman paper and cinnabar to demonstrate. First, he burned some incense and washed his hands with a serious look. After a while, he picked up his brush and focused on drawing on the paper. I Ching focused and found that the spirit qi in his body did not move at all. Only the surrounding spirit qi seeped into the tip of the brush and onto the talisman paper. In less than a while, a low-level talisman paper appeared on the table. Straight face, it's done. Yunheng put down his brush and said happily, I never thought that this dust-removing talisman would succeed on the first try. I Ching. He was a soul formation supremacy, but he could only draw a low-level dust-removing talisman. What was there to be proud of? Suddenly he understood. Could it be that these mystic cultivators did not know how to use their own spirit qi at all? Then how on earth did he cultivate to the soul formation level? After thinking about it, I Ching directly conjured a seal and used the surrounding spirit qi to make a temporary spirit testing pearl. He extended it to Yunheng and said, Put your hand on it. Yunheng was stunned. Although he did not understand what he meant, he still put his hand on it. In the next moment, the spirit testing pearl suddenly emitted a 5-colored light that gathered into a ball and merged into one. 5 elements mixed spirit root. I Ching was shocked. No wonder. The 5 elements mixed spirit root was similar to the 5 spirit roots, but they were 2 extremes different from the worst 5 spirit roots. Although the 5 elemental chaos spirit root also needed to absorb 5 types of spirit qi, the spirit roots complemented each other and merged into one. In other words, as long as it was spiritual qi, he would be able to absorb it. He did not need to separate spiritual qi like other spiritual roots. It could be said that this was the best spiritual root. More importantly, those with the 5 elements mixed spiritual roots must have the 5 elements spirit body. His body had a special ability to summon spiritual qi, so he didn't need to absorb it on his own. Spiritual qi would gather in his body on its own. Besides, he had so much merit that he wouldn't face any bottlenecks. It wouldn't be strange if he could reach the soul formation stage. What is the spirit root that fellow Taoist is talking about? Yunheng looked confused. He clearly did not know what Lone Moon was talking about. I Ching frowned and looked at him with a complicated expression. It seemed like the situation was much more serious than he had imagined. It wasn't as simple as handing over the reincarnation array and the soul transcendence spell to them. They had to start from scratch. Lone Moon turned to look at the mystic cultivators outside the inn who kept glancing over curiously. He sighed. It seemed like this was really a troublesome matter. He had to think about how to teach them. He explained a little to Yunheng and agreed to go to the mystic sect the next day to explain the situation. Only then did he ask Yunheng to leave. Master. I Ching looked at Shining, who had been chewing on her fruit the whole time. What should we do now? Looking at the situation, the cultivation sorcery of this small world was seriously lacking. To solve the problem of deviant ghosts, They had to start from the most basic qi into their bodies. How about? Xining looked calm. Give Father Nyo a call? Open a school or something. It wouldn't be the first time anyway. I Ching was stunned. His eyes brightened. Good idea. Father Nyo had experience in teaching disciples. He immediately took out the communication talisman. In the next moment, a familiar figure jumped out. Get lost. He had just told Lone Moon his idea when Lone Moon replied with a single word. He looked at the two of them like a knife. They don't know how to cultivate. It's none of my business. Can't you just give me less trouble? You want me to open a school? Do you think the invincible sect doesn't have enough to deal with? But, if you want to teach, go ahead. Why are you looking for me? I Ching was stumped. He didn't know how to answer. Xining tilted her head and leaned over. Father Nyo, you're a professional. Get lost. Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. He looked left and right. Where are you, Hong and Little Black? What are the two of you doing down there? Don't mind such details. Details my ass. You didn't even look for them, did you? Lone Moon exposed them directly. Hurry up and find them. You can do whatever you want with the rest. Oh. Xinying's eyes narrowed. She sighed and said, all right. There are so many people in this world. None of them have cultivated. They don't understand anyway. She turned and patted I Ching. Just do whatever you want and teach them. I Ching was stunned. He immediately understood something. He nodded vigorously. Yes, master. Wait. Indeed, Lone Moon suddenly spoke. What do you mean by not cultivating? It means that there are no cultivators in this world. I Ching explained. Then he added, among these people there are even people with 5-element spirit roots. But no one knows the way to cultivate. It's really a pity. After saying that, he let out a long, artificial sigh, which was completely out of character. Even someone as smart as Father Nyo didn't notice. His mind was filled with 5-element spirit roots. 5 elements mixed spirit roots. In such a small world with pitifully little spirit chi, there were actually 5 elements mixed spirit roots. That was a qualification that could allow one to ascend to immortality. If there were even such spirit roots, wouldn't other qualifications be everywhere? None of them really know how to cultivate spirit chi? Of course. Come and see if you don't believe me. Lone Moon glanced at the two of them suspiciously. Although he knew that they were doing it on purpose, he couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. There were no cultivators in the entire small world. That meant that the ground was filled with supreme-grade qualifications. They could pick and choose at will. It meant that they hadn't decided on the direction of cultivation. It meant that they could teach at will. It meant that the world would be filled with sword cultivators in the future. Then he thought about his own sect full of diamond Barbies. Master, let's go now? Although my cultivation method might not be suitable for them, we still have to give it a try. Xining nodded. The two of them were just about to leave. Stop right there. Lone Moon looked at the two of them who were already addicted to acting. The corner of his mouth twitched. That's enough? Wait here obediently. I'll make some preparations. We'll be there tomorrow. Let Chi-Chin do it. He could create a second invincible sect in minutes. Yes, Father Nyo. No problem, Father Nyo. Two Lone Moon snorted coldly. The figure on the talisman disappeared in a flash. Done. Chef, you cooperated well. Xining nudged the person beside her. It's Master who taught us well. Achievement of daily cheating achieved. Chapter 384. By the time Song Ren woke up, it was already 3 days later. The grievous aura on his body had completely disappeared, and he turned back into that translucent appearance. But, why was he hanging on the drying pole? What exactly happened? Hey, did you do it? Xining leaned on the windowsill and waved at him. Exalted immortal Shen. Song Ren hesitated. What did she mean by did it? Shouldn't she say that he was awake? He subconsciously wanted to float towards her, but a white light flashed in front of him, pushing him back. Only then did he realize that there was a layer of transparent array around him, sealing him firmly on the drying pole, unable to move. This is? Oh, I'm not afraid that you'll be blown away by the wind. Xining explained casually, turning to the person behind her. Yes, master. Yiming made a seal with his hand, instantly undoing the array around Song Ren. Only then did Song Ren come down from the drying pole and float into the house. Exalted immortals, what happened to me? He looked confused. He clearly remembered that he followed I Ching up to subdue deviant ghosts. Why was he hanging up when he came back to his senses? You don't remember anything at all? I Ching frowned and asked. Song Ren was stunned. A complicated expression flashed across his face. After a while he frowned and said, I don't know either. I felt like I went to a place. I saw a lot of people. I Ching was shocked. Could it be that he remembered his previous memories? What else did you see? It seemed like someone told me where to go. His expression grew uglier. He seemed to be trying hard to recall. After a while he shook his head. I can't remember. I just felt that it was very cold there. Exalted immortal, did I? I Ching nodded. It seemed like he could not find out why he had grievous aura on his own. But he could ask Yun Heng to help him investigate. Ever since I Ching dealt with the remnant souls that attacked the city, the mystic cultivators in the city changed their attitude towards them, but most of them still maintained a suspicious attitude. Although Yun Heng, who was like a national idol, wholeheartedly trusted and worked hard to promote them. The next day when they arrived at the Mystic Gate, the square was indeed filled with mystic cultivators. However, none of them believed in immortal cultivation like Yun Heng did. Most of them looked doubtful. He even had the thought of watching a joke. If I Ching hadn't dealt with those remnant souls that day, they probably wouldn't even have come. Actually, if one thought about it, it was understandable. After cultivating and inheriting something for hundreds of years, someone suddenly said that it was wrong. Of course they would not accept it for a while. As for Yun Heng, he was a soul formation cultivator. To a certain extent, he could sense the heavenly Tao better than others. He must have long suspected the so-called profound technique. That was why he immediately believed I Ching's words. Fellow Taoist Yi. Yun Heng took a step forward and looked at I Ching beside him. Although he did not know why I Ching wanted all the mystic cultivators to gather here, he still did as he was told. Everyone is here. Shall we begin? Let's wait a little longer, I Ching said. What else do we need to wait for? Wait for Father Nyo. Ha! Yun Heng paused. Who's Father Nyo? It's the meaning of a parent, he casually explained. Parents? Was it the patriarch? Could it be that he came from a hidden family? Before Yun Heng could react, a few heavenly voices suddenly came from the sky. The voices were light and simple, as if they were close to his ears, but also seemed far away. The square suddenly became restless. Look up, someone exclaimed. Everyone raised their heads and looked up in shock. A tall palace suddenly appeared in the sky, floating high in the air. The palace was surrounded by large patches of colorful spirit light, illuminating the entire palace like a dream. It was as if a celestial realm had come to the world. In an instant, it was as if some kind of pressure came out of the palace and swept toward everyone, causing their hearts to tremble. Everyone present was stunned. They looked at the strange scene that suddenly appeared in disbelief. Except for the two who received the news in advance. I Ching, Shining, Father Nyo's appearance this time was rather high profile. The kind that came with its own background music. In the next moment, several figures flew out of the palace and slowly stopped in the sky above everyone. They were all dressed in the same white robes, embroidered with golden auspicious clouds. They stepped on a sword that was overflowing with spirit chi. But for some reason, although there was nothing covering them, they could not see their faces clearly. When they looked over, they could only see a blurry figure. Especially the person in the middle, his body seemed to be surrounded by a shocking suppressive force. Looking at him made their hearts sink, and they did not dare to look at him directly. Everyone became even more excited. This was definitely not any mystic technique. This was more like an immortal's technique. They saw that the few people stopped in the sky above the square. Only then did the person on the right speak loudly. His voice was not loud, but it reached everyone's ears clearly. The disciples of Invincible Sect have come into the world under the orders of the sect master to find fated people and teach them the Tao of immortal cultivation. I hope that after you receive this opportunity, you will stick to the right path and protect the peace of the world. As soon as he finished speaking, the other party waved his hand. Everyone looked in shock. On an empty space on the right side of the square, a tall platform appeared out of thin air. In a quarter of an hour we will start testing for spirit roots here. We will select the most talented disciples and teach them the way of cultivation. Anyone can participate. With that said, the few of them flashed and flew back to the palace in the sky between the clouds. The whole place was silent. No one could react for a long time. After a while, they rushed to the side of the platform on the right and formed a long line, waiting excitedly. Although they did not know what testing for spirit roots was, the scene just now was not fake. At that moment, there was no longer any doubt in their hearts. So there really was a way to cultivate to become immortal in this world. What Master Yun Tian said was true. At that moment, in the palace in the sky, the four people who were suddenly teleported up after watching a wave of pretentious acts. "Hey, Father Nyo." Shining greeted the person in the middle. The other party rolled his eyes at her. Instead, the eyes of the few girls beside him brightened. One by one they went forward and bowed. "Greetings, Sect Master." Shining greeted them all. "Hey, little green, little white, little pink, little white." To everyone, Siyu, who was dressed in pink, tugged at her clothes, considering whether to change back to green. Indeed, once she changed her clothes, even her name changed. There are a lot of people here this time. And they're very high profile." I Ching added. "Didn't you say that no one here has cultivated spirit chi before?" Lone Moon stepped forward and said, "Of course I have to be fully prepared. If I don't do this, how can I make them believe me so easily?" He did not want to cause a fight over the cultivation system. That was equivalent to holding a press conference in advance. Of course he had to make it as high profile as possible. The few of them paused. They thought back to the mystic cultivators in the square. Indeed, after seeing them appear, regardless of whether they were skeptical or not, they were now completely convinced. "Fellow Taoist, you really have foresight." Yun Heng was delighted. He immediately understood his intention. This palace that suddenly appeared high up in the sky, not to mention the others, even he was shocked. At first, he was still thinking about how to persuade everyone to give up on their original mystic techniques. But after this incident, that problem was solved. This was such a shocking technique. Even without him saying it, the others knew how to choose. "You are the lamp, Master Yun Tian?" Lone Moon smiled politely at Yun Heng. He was pierced by the golden light of merit around him. He subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Indeed, as Shining said, he was a very bright light bulb. Chapter 385. Fellow Taoist, you can just call me Yun Heng. Yun Heng became even more polite. He looked at Lone Moon with an even brighter gaze. "I still don't know how to address you, fellow Taoist." Lone Moon. Father Nyo gave him a businesslike smile and turned to introduce the few people behind him. "They are all disciples of my invincible sect. This time, I hope fellow Taoist can cooperate with me." "Of course." He nodded repeatedly, his face filled with obvious joy. Cultivation and preaching are important matters. If there are any problems, as long as fellow Taoist asks, I will definitely not refuse. Lone Moon did not say much. After exchanging a few pleasantries with him, he asked him to bring Siyu and the others down to test their spirit roots. Only 3 people and 1 ghost were left in the hall. Naturally, they didn't need to personally attend to a matter like accepting a disciple. Otherwise it would be too degrading. It wasn't easy for him to show off, so he naturally had to do it to the end. However, he was indeed curious about the qualifications of the people from this small world. He immediately summoned a water mirror, and the scene on the testing platform below appeared before his eyes. At that moment there was already a long queue. All the mystic cultivators were looking excitedly at the stage. Perhaps it was because Siyu and the rest were on the stage, there was no fighting. They went up the stage one by one in an orderly fashion. What was amazing was that among all the people who went up to the stage, other than 1 or 2 commoners who joined in the fun, the mystic cultivators who were originally guarding the city all had spirit roots. Moreover, their aptitudes were not bad. Most of them had dual or triple spiritual roots. In less than an hour, 2 celestial spiritual roots had been detected. Such a good aptitude was rare even in other small worlds with rich spiritual chi. It was as if all the good talents had been gathered in this city, but why do they all have cultivation bases? Lone Moon glared at the unreliable pair of master and disciple. "Didn't you say that there are no cultivators in this world?" The people who went up for the spirit root test were all at the 1st to 5th stage of chi refinement. Especially those 2 with heaven spiritual roots, they had already reached the 8th level of chi refinement. Maybe it's because of the so-called profound technique. I Ching replied, "Previously, they all cultivated a mystic technique that was similar to talisman cultivation. They often had to draw talismans, even though they didn't know how to draw chi into their bodies. But if I use the surrounding spiritual chi to draw talismans, it will naturally affect me. It was just that they lacked understanding of spiritual energy and didn't know how to circulate it. Naturally, they couldn't pass through the lightning tribulation and successfully build their foundation. Therefore, their cultivation could only stop at the chi refining stage." Lone Moon thought of this as well. He scanned with his divine perception. Indeed, there was not a single foundation establishment cultivator in the plaza. Suddenly he thought of another question. How did that Yun Heng reach the soul formation stage? He has a lamp, merit, I Ching explained. Lone Moon was stunned. He recalled the blinding golden light on Yun Heng's body. People with merit would usually be favored by the heavenly Tao. That was the rule of the heavenly Tao. The golden light of merit on Yun Heng's body was so bright. Naturally, there were no obstacles to his cultivation. It was normal that he did not encounter any lightning tribulations. He looked curiously at the mirror, at the person who was seriously helping see you register. You can sense that your cultivation method is wrong, and you can still make up your mind to change it in time. Most importantly, it wasn't for his own selfishness, but for the sake of this world. Yun Heng's breadth of mind is rare indeed. No wonder he has so much merit. Indeed. I Ching nodded as well. He should have been the first to sense that there was a problem with this world's cultivation. What's more, after knowing that he was cultivating the immortal Tao, ordinary people would not be able to resist the temptation to change their cultivation methods privately. But his first reaction was to beg him to teach this cultivation method to all the mystic cultivators in the world. He had no intention of keeping it to himself. All he wanted was to solve the world's crisis. He is indeed a rare kind person. You can't say that. The moment the two of them finished speaking, Song Ren, who had been silent all this while, suddenly snorted coldly. He looked straight at the mirror and his eyes darkened. Some people can't be seen on the surface. Until the end, who knows what he's thinking? Xining, who was chewing on her fruit, paused and turned to look at the rich ghost. You don't like him? I Ching and Lone Moon turned to look at him as well. They were surprised that he would suddenly say something like that. Song Ren frowned and glanced at the mirror in disdain. He said subconsciously, he looks like the sun. Just looking at him hurts my eyes. What's there to like? The disdain in his eyes deepened. There was also some anger in his eyes. He stared at Yun Heng. I Ching was shocked. He stepped forward and said, You can see the light of merit around him? It's so bright. How can I not see it? He looked like he was not blind. I Ching exchanged a look with Lone Moon. Then he said, Song Ren, you used to know Yun Heng? Song Ren turned. I don't? Then why do you suddenly hate him so much? He stared blankly as if he had just realized it. A look of confusion flashed across his face. He scratched his head. I don't know. Anyway, he doesn't look like a good person. I hate him. With that said, he nodded vigorously. He stared at the person in the mirror again. Even his hands by his side tightened. I Ching frowned even deeper. By right, people with the light of merit would subconsciously give people a sense of friendliness. Although Song Ren was a coward, he was not a difficult person to get along with. In fact, compared to Lone Moon and Master, he was even friendlier and friendlier. By right, today should be the first time they met. Why did Song Ren hate Yun Heng so much? Could it be that his death in his previous life had something to do with Yun Heng? It looked like he had to ask Yun Heng about this. Lone Moon was a little excited. He did not expect to gain so many sword cultivator disciples just by showing off. The next day, Siyu told him the results of the spirit roots test. There were actually 17 celestial spirit roots. 2 of them were variant spirit roots. There were also hundreds of people with double and triple spirit roots. There were even more people with mixed spirit roots. Lone Moon chose those who were suitable for sword cultivation and had good potential to teach them personally. The rest were handed over to Siyu and the others to teach them the basics of drawing chi into their bodies and basic sword techniques. He instructed them again and again not to teach them body tempering. After completely cutting off all contact between Xining and the others, Lone Moon let them into the hall. The more he looked at the cultivators in front of him, the more satisfied he was. Although they were all a bit old, missed the best cultivation period and had a lot of impurities in their bodies. However, as long as he worked hard, he would be able to reach the core formation stage before his lifespan ended. Not only would he be able to ascend to become an immortal, but he would also be able to reach the soul formation stage. Although the spirit chi in this small world was thin and there were pitifully few spirit herbs and spirit plants to support it. But these had nothing to do with sword cultivators. Sword cultivators practiced sword techniques. Elixirs and whatnot, other than for emergencies, had no benefits to cultivation. What's more, there was Yun Heng. He was already at the soul formation stage. As long as he practiced his cultivation technique, he would be able to survive the ascension lightning tribulation and ascend to the celestial world. Of course, he naturally practiced the mental cultivation method of swordsmanship. Lone Moon could already see the beautiful era of sword cultivators all over the place. He plunged headfirst into the great cause of teaching others how to cultivate. Xining, who was openly slacking off, why do I feel like I've forgotten something? Forget it, it's not important. Chef, can you make some afternoon tea? I'm hungry. Yes, master, no problem, master. Chapter 386. Perhaps because they already had the foundation of drawing talismans before, everyone learned to draw qi into their bodies very quickly. In just a few months, most of them had already advanced 1 or 2 levels in their cultivation. Especially Yunheng, he went from early-stage soul formation to mid-stage soul formation. But these people's meridians had not been cleansed by spirit qi for a long time, and the impurities in their bodies had accumulated for a long time. It would definitely affect their foundation. Because of this, Lone Moon decided to let them stop drawing qi and directly switch to basic sword techniques. Sword techniques could strengthen one's physique and help to clear the meridians. Other than that, he forced everyone to abstain from eating to prevent more impurities from accumulating. People who had just started abstaining from eating were very painful. Although they would not feel hungry with the pill of fasting, they were used to having 3 meals a day. Even if they were not hungry, the desire to eat was hard to suppress. This was also why it was better to take in disciples as young as possible. Especially these people who were changing their cultivation, most of them were adults. They had been eating grains for decades, and now they suddenly ran out of food. Naturally, it was a kind of torture for them. But Lone Moon was a strict teacher. He was very determined to abstain from eating. He directly stopped the canteen and even closed the mountain gates. So the rear hall of the entire immortal sect, which was the only place where people could eat, became the place where they had to practice sword techniques and study mental cultivation techniques. So fragrant. He turned his head and looked at the row of people lying on the wall. They were drooling and their eyes were glowing green. Xining was stunned. Under the gaze of hundreds of eyes, she silently ate another mouthful of rice. Indeed, in the next moment, a series of gurgling sounds came from outside the wall. Faintly, there was also the sound of people drooling even more happily. Suddenly, she was a little worried. This wall wouldn't collapse, right? The feeling of being stared at by hundreds of pairs of eyes while eating every day, Xining really felt no pressure at all. In fact, she even wanted to add another dish to her plate. A 0? Chef, make 2 more dishes. I'm not full. Yes, master, no problem, master. Lone Moon, who just entered, Yunheng, who just entered, everyone on the wall, cough. Lone Moon coughed heavily, successfully attracting the attention of the group of people on the wall. His expression turned cold. Have you all finished practicing the basic sword techniques for today? All of a sudden, everyone froze, like a child who had made a mistake. Replying to, Exalted Master, we have already finished practicing. You still have the strength to lean against the wall? Looks like it's too easy. Tomorrow I'll practice 100 times more. Everyone's face turned pale. Are you a devil? For a moment, wails and cries could be heard everywhere. Everyone had no choice but to quietly retreat from the wall and flee with their tails between their legs. And you? Lone Moon turned and glared at a certain foodie. Why must we eat in the yard? Can't we go back to our rooms and eat? It would affect the morale of the army. Xining replied as she ate, the table in the room is too small. It won't fit. Lone Moon scanned the table full of dishes and pursed his lips. This reason was really irrefutable. Don't worry, Exalted Master. Yunheng smiled and said, they're just not used to fasting for the first time. They'll get used to it after a while. He could only think of it this way. A few days later, the number of people drooling on the wall became fewer and fewer. They no longer came to watch and instead asked in person. Master Xin, I heard that your cultivation method is different from ours. Master Xin, I heard that you don't need to fast? Master Xin, I heard that you were the one who taught Exalted Master Cu and the others their cultivation techniques. Master Xin, when are you free? Can you give us some pointers? Master Xin, do you think I have the qualifications to cultivate your cultivation technique? The kind that doesn't need to fast. I Ching, Xining, Lone Moon, his heart skipped a beat. It was as if he smelled the scent of a second invincible sect. He suddenly had the urge to expel a certain person from the invincible sect from the sect. Cough that. Yunheng chuckled and hurriedly changed the topic. Oh yes, fellow Taoist, I Ching called me here in such a hurry. What's the matter? Only then did I Ching remember the matter at hand. He turned to look at Song Ren, who was staring at Yunheng like a thief. I Ching conjured a seal and turned his illusory body into his soul body. Yunheng, have you seen him before? Yunheng paused. He did not understand what I Ching meant, but he still looked Song Ren up and down seriously. After a while, he shook his head in confusion. I've never seen this little brother before. Who's your little brother? Song Ren retorted reflexively. He snorted and said, don't try to make connections. Yunheng was speechless. It was as if this was the first time he had met such a rude person. But he still said in a good mood, I've misspoken, but... He turned to look at I Ching and said, I've really never met him before. Why do you ask, fellow Taoist I Ching? You've really never seen me before? Song Ren looked at him suspiciously. His face was full of disdain. Indeed, I've never seen you before. Yunheng nodded. You're not pretending, are you? Song Ren looked even more suspicious. He turned to I Ching and said, exalted immortal, sanctimonious mystic cultivators like them are the best at lying. Don't believe them so easily. This? Yunheng looked innocent, but he still explained kindly, fellow Taoist, I've been in seclusion for decades. This is the first time I've come out. I really don't know you. His name is Song Ren. He accidentally forgot something important, I Ching explained. That's why we want to understand what happened. I see. He nodded. Then he thought of something and suggested, although I don't know him, there are many mystic cultivators here. What's more, most of them travel all over the world. Why don't I go and ask around? I'm sure there will be some results. Would you be so kind? Before I Ching could speak, Song Ren suddenly snorted. Since fellow Taoist Song is a friend of the exalted masters, I will naturally do my best to help. You make it sound so nice. Song Ren's expression became more and more irritated. He could not help but feel angry. Who knows what you'll do when you get the chance? You don't have to worry about me. Who knows, you might end up in trouble. Fellow Taoist Song, you don't trust me? You have such a detestable face. Why should I trust you? You. Even a clay figurine would get angry. Song Ren's words were so rude that Yunheng could not help but frown. What, you want to kill me to silence me? Song Ren's expression became even more furious. He was trying hard to suppress something. His whole body was tense as if he was going to rush out the next moment. His whole body seemed like it was going to explode. Rich ghost. Shining suddenly reached out and patted his shoulder. Song Ren was stunned. His body, which was tense just now, suddenly became like a balloon that had been patted. Something inside of him leaked out completely. He turned to look at Shining, stunned. Exalted? Immortal? Speak properly. Song Ren's eyes flashed with a hint of confusion. Then, he lowered his head and did not continue speaking. Chapter 387. Song Ren and Yunheng seemed to be at loggerheads. More accurately, Song Ren disliked Yunheng. If he did not argue with him every time he met him, he would feel uncomfortable. In the past, Yunheng was busy making arrangements for the mystic cultivators and did not come to the back hall often. But ever since he started cultivating, he had no choice but to come. His cultivation level was the highest. Naturally, his cultivation technique was different from others. He could only ask Lone Moon and I Ching. He could only go to the back hall again and again. That was why he met Song Ren often. No matter how good Yunheng's temper was, he was always angered by Song Ren. And Song Ren seemed to like this irritating activity. Even if Yunheng did not come sometimes, he would purposely go and find some small trouble from time to time. For example, from time to time he would draw a turtle on his Taoist robe, dig a big hole in his path, break the bed frame when he slept, steal toilet paper when he went to the toilet, and so on. These things were not big, but they all made people go crazy. All the disciples in the sect could hear Yunheng's exasperated roars from time to time. Song Ren, on the other hand, was enjoying himself. He looked as if he was relieved to see Yunheng in trouble. Speaking of which, Shining could not help but ask, how much do you hate light bulbs? I don't hate them. Song Ren blinked innocently and said seriously, exalted immortal, don't worry. I'm not such a narrow-minded person. Shining tilted her head and pointed at Yunheng. Then can you take the kettle away from his head first? You've been watering him for so long. He's a light bulb, not a carrot. What if the electricity leaks? I Ching, Lone Moon, Yunheng, who was drenched. All right, exalted immortal. Song Ren put down the kettle in his hand, looking relaxed. Anyway, he had already drenched himself. Yunheng wiped the water off his face and conjured a dust removal spell that he had just learned. Only then did his soaked clothes dry. As if already used to a certain someone's prank, he turned and bowed to Lone Moon. Thank you for your guidance, exalted master. I understand now. I'll take my leave first and focus on my cultivation. Then go. Lone Moon nodded. Only then did he quickly leave the rear hall with the turtles painted in all sorts of postures and colors, as if he was afraid that Song Ren would follow him. Only then did everyone turn to look at a certain ghost. I didn't do anything. Song Ren hid the kettle behind him and turned to look at the sky. The trio? Do you think we're blind? It wasn't that they didn't try to stop Song Ren, but he was especially stubborn when it came to dealing with Yun Heng. It was useless no matter what he said. Even if he was put in confinement, he would actually imitate the other disciples and cultivate as a ghost immortal. Then he would come out and continue messing with people. They could only watch helplessly as he turned from a coward into a mischievous one, and a very bear-like one at that. You. I Ching glared at him. After a while he sighed and said, forget it. He did not know if it was because of the influence of Radish's illusory body, but even his personality was leaning towards it. What's more, there must be a reason why he disliked Yun Heng so much. Although it was true that Yun Heng did not know him, they could be related in other ways. There must be a cause and effect. It would not be good for them to interfere too much. Exalted Immortal. Song Ren suddenly thought of something. His eyes shifted and he walked towards I Ching awkwardly. He lowered his voice and said, do you think this illusory body of mine is sick? I Ching paused and glanced at him. How can an illusory body be sick? It was an immortal object in the first place, not a mortal body. But his expression became even more complicated. As if he was worried about something, he tugged at the corner of his clothes and said, I feel like my body is different from before. This body was given to me by you. Why don't you examine it for me? I Ching frowned. Song Ren's soul would produce grievous energy. It would indeed be troublesome for an illusory body to have a problem. So he pointed at Song Ren's brow and retracted his hand after a while. It's fine. How can it be? Song Ren looked shocked. That's impossible. Why don't you take another look? It's really fine. He became even more anxious. He looked at Lone Moon beside him as if asking for help. Why don't we? If Chef says it's fine, then it's definitely fine. Without waiting for him to speak, Lone Moon said directly, illusory body is a divine technique. He's more knowledgeable about it than I am. But Song Ren's expression became even more strange. His face turned pale and he looked like he wanted to say something but stopped. What exactly do you want to say? Lone Moon asked. I Ching also saw that his expression was not right. Just say it. Song Ren subconsciously glanced at Shining beside him. Something flashed across his face. He coughed and said, well, can the two exalted immortals step aside and have a word? With that said, without waiting for the two of them to react, he directly pulled one person with each hand and walked out in a hurry. Only a certain person who was chewing on a fruit was left. Shining, could it be a little secret between men that she could not hear? What exactly is it? I Ching frowned and gave a certain mischievous look at a certain mischievous ghost. Master was too far away. What if he was abducted? Two exalted immortals. Song Ren's expression became even more anxious. There's really something wrong with this illusory body of mine. Especially in the past 2 days, it obviously feels different. How is it different? Song Ren's face was full of confusion. He then opened his mouth and said, replying to exalted immortals, in the past 2 days, my lower body has suddenly felt warm and painful. It's like I want something more. What's the reason? I Ching was stunned. Suddenly he thought of something and his whole body stiffened. What's the matter, Chef? Lone Moon asked subconsciously. Is his condition very serious? No. The corner of I Ching's mouth twitched. After a while he said, his illusory body is made of Radish's dandelion. Dandelion? Radish's. Lone Moon, who understood immediately, also stiffened. Instantly, 2 pairs of eyes swept over a certain unspeakable part of Song Ren. A century-long silence. What's the matter? Song Ren suddenly felt a little cold in his lower body. He subconsciously covered it. Thinking that he could not hide his illness for fear of treatment, he gritted his teeth and said, can't you diagnose it without seeing it for yourself? Why don't I let you take a look? They were all men anyway. With that said, he pulled on the top of his pants and was about to pull it down. Stop. The two of them reached out at the same time and pressed his hand down. We're not that close. Don't learn from Radish on this. Then what should we do? Don't worry, it's fine. I Ching's expression became even more strange. Your illusory body, has always been like this. It's very normal. You'll get used to it. That's right, that's right. Lone Moon nodded vigorously. This is a normal phenomenon. But, no buts. We'll just pull it out after a few days. Yes, maybe we can even refine pills for the disciples to eat. Song Ren, pull it out? Refine pills? Eat. Are you demons? Chapter 388. Ever since the conversation about the illusory body, Song Ren had been quiet for a few days. He was not in the mood to cause trouble for Yunheng. Instead, he hid the moment he saw I Ching and Lone Moon. He even covered his lower body. That terrified expression made it seem as if they were going to do something to him in the next moment. His eyes were filled with resentment. Hey, what do you mean by that look of yours? Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He could not help but grab him back. Even if that thing of yours grows out, we're not interested, all right? We don't lack it. Don't lack it? Song Ren's eyes widened. What did he mean? Did he pluck a lot of it before? That thing of yours, we have a pile of it in our warehouse. Radish had to pluck it every once in a while. A pile. Song Ren's eyes were filled with even more fear. Even his legs began to tremble. That's enough. Do you really think we care about that thing of yours? You have a whole warehouse of it and you still say you don't care? Since it's already grown on your body, you can do whatever you want with it. Whether you give it to someone or refine it into pills, we can't be bothered. But let me remind you, after you pluck it, if you do not preserve it with sorcery, you have to refine it into pills within 3 days. Otherwise you can't eat the pills you refine. Eat. Plucking and eating. Beast. Song Ren felt a chill in his lower body. He felt waves of illusory pain. You bunch of devils. With that said, he flung Lone Moon's hand away and ran out. He did not even notice Yunheng, who was walking right in front of him. In an instant he disappeared. Lone Moon, I Ching, Shining, why are you looking at me? Lone Moon turned back and glared at the master and disciple. Did I say anything wrong? No. The master and disciple both shook their heads. Pluck rice, cook, you're rich, you're right. 3 exalted masters. Yunheng, who had just entered, looked confused. Fellow Taoist Song, what's wrong? Maybe it's the rebellious phase? Lone Moon replied casually. He glanced at him and asked, what's the matter? It was only then that Yunheng remembered his purpose. He quickly handed the letter in his hand to Lone Moon and said excitedly, it's like this, exalted master. I've just received an urgent report from the mystic sect. At the border of the north, I've discovered a strange, remnant soul. Moreover, it seemed to be heading their way. This disciple was thinking that since everyone has cultivated for so long, could it be possible? You want those people from the sect to deal with the remnant souls? Lone Moon frowned. Yes. Yunheng nodded, looking even more excited. Everyone's goal in changing their cultivation was to get rid of deviant ghosts and bring peace to the world. Why don't we take this opportunity to bring everyone along? No. They've just learned how to draw chi into their bodies. They haven't even reached foundation establishment yet. He hadn't even learned many spells, yet he wanted to deal with remnant souls and a large group of them at that. Are they going to redeem the souls or send themselves to their deaths? Yunheng was stumped. He knew that this was a little risky. But, if we leave the remnant souls alone, what if they attack other commoner cities again? What should we do? I'll go with Chef. They were just remnant souls. They must not affect their cultivation of the sword. Yunheng's expression changed. He looked like he was in a difficult position. A sliver of hesitation flashed across his face. After a while, he said, I naturally believe in the abilities of the 2 exalted masters. It's just that, everyone has been cultivating for a period of time. Although Exalted Master taught us everything and the disciples were impressed. But after all, we haven't really fought each other. As time passes, if... He stopped halfway through his sentence. His face looked worried and guilty at the same time. Lone Moon was stunned for a moment. Then he understood what he meant. He had indeed neglected a problem, the human heart. Previously, they made such a high-profile appearance and even specially prepared an immortal palace to raise their profile. That was to make this completely devoid of cultivators believe that immortal cultivation did indeed exist. And these few months, everyone had indeed been won over by drawing chi into their bodies and all kinds of sword techniques. But all this was built on the assumption that cultivation would allow them to better deal with deviant ghosts. They had never seen it with their own eyes. In other words, everything was still in the theoretical stage. They had been building a cart behind closed doors without actually putting it into action. It was fine at the beginning. But as time passed, everyone might start to suspect something. When that happened, the hearts of the people would not be united. That would definitely affect their cultivation. I understand. Lone Moon nodded. It was indeed time to bring them out to see the world. Later, ask Siyu to choose a few people who are familiar with using spirit chi. Together with you they will follow us to the north. Yes, exalted master. Yun Heng heaved a sigh of relief and turned to leave. Siyu chose 7 people. Most of them were at the 6th or 7th stage of chi refinement. They were all very young. Their bone ages ranged from 10 to 20 years old. Thinking about it carefully, it was normal. The younger they were, the less impurities in their bodies. Naturally, their spirit chi would flow more smoothly. Lone Moon had never thought of letting them become his helpers. They were only following to test out the effects of cultivation. In other words, they were going to use it to advertise. Thus, he gave them a few simple instructions. Then he summoned his flying Dharma artifact and flew towards the north that Yun Heng had mentioned. Everyone was obviously excited, especially when they saw the wooden boat that Lone Moon had casually thrown out. Instantly, it turned into a spirit boat and carried everyone up into the sky. They were stunned for a full 15 minutes before they dared to move around on the spirit boat. Their eyes were shining brightly. Considering that they were all chi refinement disciples, if they flew too fast, they might not be able to withstand the spiritual pressure on the spirit boat. Lone Moon had no choice but to slow down. The group of 10 flew for an entire day before they reached the north. From afar they could see a desolate land. The ground looked as if it had been roasted by fire. It was pitch black and charred. Looking around, there was not a single bit of green. It looked especially bleak. Lone Moon used his divine perception to scan the area. Then he steered the spirit boat towards the west, where the yin chi was the thickest. The further they flew, the darker the sky became. In a short while, even though it was a bright sunny day, everything around them had turned gray. They could faintly hear the shrill cries of ghosts in front of them. It was especially piercing. It's deviant ghosts. The deviant ghosts are right in front of us. A disciple shouted. Lone Moon landed directly and kept the spirit boat. It was already very dark around them. A large amount of bone-chilling yin chi swept towards the crowd, blotting out the sky. The ghostly cries seemed to be right beside their ears. They were even clearer now. Everyone panicked. One by one, they took out their swords and looked in front of them with some trepidation and fear. Calm down. Lone Moon turned back and reminded them. Follow the way you usually practice using your spirit chi. Activate your spirit chi. Everyone was stunned. One by one, they followed his instructions. Indeed, in the next moment, the bone-chilling yin chi dissipated completely. Their bodies quickly warmed up. Their bodies seemed to have an additional layer of protection. The yin chi was directly blocked. Chapter 389. It's useful. Everyone's fear was swept away, and their eyes were filled with excitement. In the past, they had to use countless talismans to expel the yin chi. But just now, they had just circulated their spiritual chi and they could not feel it at all. With spirit chi protecting your body, ghosts and spirits won't be able to harm you. Lone Moon explained. As long as you release your spirit chi, those remnant souls won't be able to hurt you. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone became even more excited. In the next moment, the huge group of remnant souls was already flying towards them. Along with a series of shrill ghost cries, a group of inky black things surged toward them. One could even faintly see a terrifying shadow within them. Looking at the number of remnant souls, it seemed to be even more than the previous wave of attacks. I Ching frowned and stepped forward, about to conjure a seal. Wait. Lone Moon suddenly pulled him back and turned to face Yun Heng. Let him come. Yun Heng paused. Even the golden light of merit on his body shook. His eyes widened in disbelief. Did he hear wrongly? Yes. Lone Moon nodded. Since they were going to advertise, they naturally had to find someone to support them. Didn't I teach you about the reincarnation array? The corner of Yun Heng's mouth twitched. But you just taught me yesterday? He had not even started practicing. Did he have to be so fast? All the best. Lone Moon patted him on the shoulder. You have the highest cultivation level out of everyone here. I have high hopes for you. Are you sure you're not trying to trick me? Those remnant souls had already pounced over, and the light around them was instantly swallowed up. It was as if they were immersed in ink, and a series of ear-piercing ghost cries cut through their eardrums like knives. The hearts of all the disciples tightened, but they found that there was no damage to their bodies. It was just as Lone Moon had said, with the protection of spirit chi, ghosts and spirits could not invade. Yun Heng gritted his teeth. He had no choice but to bite the bullet. Recalling the spell that Lone Moon had taught her yesterday, she used all the spirit chi in her body to form a seal and recited a series of complicated spells. In an instant, a golden light flashed in his hand, and a familiar formation appeared under his feet. However, it only flashed for a moment before disappearing again. Yun Heng took a deep breath, conjured another seal and recited once more. However, just like the last time, the array formation collapsed as soon as it appeared. He tried 4 to 5 times without success, and his forehead was covered in sweat. Maintain the balance of the formation's spirit chi. I Ching couldn't stand it anymore and reminded her. If they wasted any more time, they wouldn't be able to make it back in time to make dinner for Master. Yun Heng paused. His eyes brightened as if he had figured something out. Thank you, exalted Master, for your guidance. Then he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to visualize the formation in his mind. Then he circulated his spiritual chi and began to form hand seals inch by inch, chanting an incantation. The next moment the formation finally took shape and it grew larger and larger. In just a short while, it had spread to everyone's feet. The yin chi in the surroundings dissipated, and the phantoms that had been attacking everyone slowly calmed down, turning back into white transparent figures. Their expressions also became serene. A moment later, it turned into wisps of green smoke and disappeared. After all, Yun Heng was only a soul formation cultivator. Naturally, his spirit power could not compare to I Ching's. In addition, there were more remnant souls this time around. He had to divide them 6 times before he could send all the remnant souls into the river of forgetfulness. Since it was his first time setting up an array and he wasn't very familiar with the control of his spiritual energy, he had almost used up all the spiritual energy in his body after just a few large-scale reincarnation arrays. He placed his hands on his knees and took a few deep breaths. But his expression was one of excitement that he had never shown before. He even looked like he wanted to do it again. For the first time, he understood that remnant souls could be handled like this. It was different from the heavy and repressed feeling he had when he saw mystic cultivators dealing with deviant ghosts in the past. This time he could clearly feel that those remnant souls had really returned to where they belonged. Even though his spiritual energy was almost depleted, he felt a sense of satisfaction and peace of mind that he had never felt before. It was as if he was not watching the remnant souls disappear, but witnessing their rebirth. This was the true rebirth. The other disciples also looked excited and in disbelief. Looking at the surroundings that had brightened up again, their eyes were filled with starlight. In the past, hundreds or even thousands of mystic cultivators were needed to deal with deviant ghosts. Now only one person was needed. What's more, in less than 5 minutes, they were completely dealt with without any casualties. So, the so-called cultivators were this powerful. If they continued to cultivate like this, they would not have to worry about not dealing with deviant ghosts. World peace was just around the corner. In fact, perhaps it was not impossible to ascend to immortality that the exalted masters talked about. For a moment, all the disciples present were silent in the shock just now. But Lone Moon frowned. He turned to look at the north, which was still filled with yin chi. Over there, go back? I Ching asked. Then he added, it's night. I'm going back to cook. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. You make it sound like you did not prepare food for a certain foodie. He took out the small wooden boat from just now and threw it into the air. With a spell in his hand, it turned into a huge spirit boat. Everyone get on the boat. Let's go back. Yes, exalted master. Everyone answered respectfully. Then they walked towards the spirit boat excitedly. I Ching was about to get on the boat too. Suddenly he felt a chill behind him. A wind blew past his ears. He was startled and a sword chi slashed behind him. In the next moment there was a loud bang. A crack appeared on the ground instantly, but it did not hit anything. In an instant, a gray aura filled the sky. It rushed towards the people on the spirit boat with a violent aura. Grievance. Lone Moon was shocked. Their spirit chi could block the yin chi, but it could not block the grievance. Seeing that the grievance was about to swallow them up, an array formed in his hand. A golden light enveloped everyone on the spirit boat, blocking the grievance that filled the sky. Heaven Master Yun Heng. A disciple on the boat suddenly cried out. Lone Moon's heart sank. He turned and realized that Yun Heng had not gotten on the boat yet, and the grievance had completely wrapped him up. He waved his hand and a sword chi flew in that direction. His original intention was to disperse the grievance. But before the sword chi landed, the grievance suddenly disappeared, along with Yun Hang who was inside. What happened? Where did he go? Over there. I Ching turned to look towards the north. He immediately rode on his sword and chased after him. Lone Moon frowned. Once again he strengthened a few layers of array formations around the spirit boat. We're going to save people. You guys go back first. With that said, he waved his hand. The entire spirit boat flew up and flew in the direction of the sect. He summoned his spirit sword. Just as he was about to ride on his sword to chase after I Ching, a red light suddenly lit up beside him. Something trembled at his waist. It was the transmission talisman he had left for Siyu. He quickly took it out and sent a bit of spirit chi into it. In the next moment, Siyu's image appeared above the talisman, her face full of anxiety. Elder Lone Moon, bad news? Sect Master. Sect Master is missing. What? W? Chapter 390. What's going on? Lone Moon's expression was one of rage. Indeed, they would get lost the moment they were not looking. Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on that person with no sense of direction? What did you do? No. Siyu became even more anxious. We were indeed keeping an eye on Sect Master. But Sect Master just disappeared right in front of our eyes. Disappeared? He frowned. After a long while he said, "All right, I got it. Keep an eye on the disciples in the sect. Chef and I will be back in a while." Yes. Lone Moon put away the transmission talisman. His frown deepened. Although Shining was not reliable, she could not have left on her own after promising them to stay put. What's more, Siyu's words suggested that something must have happened to her. Lone Moon pondered for a moment and hurriedly rode his sword in the direction of Chef. Chef did not go far. In less than a quarter of an hour he saw Shining. Yun Heng, who had disappeared into the grievous aura, was also intercepted by him. He was now setting up a sword array to trap the grievous aura that was trying to escape. He seemed to want to dispel the grievous aura and was casting a spell. Lone Moon hurriedly landed and said, "Shining disappeared." What? I Ching turned around abruptly. Sword intent exploded from his body. Even the spirit sword that had been well controlled in the air fell with a swoosh. Oh, the person who had just been wrapped in resentment let out a pained cry as he was struck by the sword, which directly stabbed into his leg. The resentment that could not be dispersed for a long time was instantly sliced clean by the soaring sword chi. Yun Heng, who was in so much pain that he was gasping for breath. Ow, 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 ow. What's wrong with Master? I Ching asked Lone Moon anxiously. I'm not sure yet. Siyu said that she suddenly disappeared in front of us. Lone Moon shook his head. I Ching's expression darkened. His entire body was filled with cold chi. Why was there always a little bitch trying to steal Master from him? Let's go back. With that, he mounted his sword. Wait. Lone Moon pulled him back. Don't rush. You know Shining. If she doesn't want to, no one can move her. She disappeared in such a strange manner, the only possibility is that she discovered something. I Ching frowned. He calmed down and thought for a moment before saying, the only strange thing about this realm are those deviant ghosts. Could it be that Master's disappearance has something to do with them? Lone Moon also thought of this point. The remnant souls in this small world are indeed shocking. Father Nyo, Master has a communication talisman on her. Can you contact her? Even a communication amulet won't work on her with that shielding attribute of hers. It's not like I haven't tried it before. Any communication amulet? Wait. He suddenly thought of something and looked at the wristband on his hand. His eyes lit up. I remember that there's a work report function in this wristband. I can contact the manager directly. As he spoke, he immediately tapped on the wristband on his wrist. At least he did not waste a month of reading the user manual. A moment later, a light screen popped up. Shining, who was sitting on something and eating snacks like a hamster, appeared on the light screen. I Ching, Lone Moon, sure enough, his worries were unnecessary. A chef, Father Nyo? Shinying's hand paused. She stuffed the last piece of snack into her mouth and then clapped her hands. Why is it you guys? The communication device suddenly rang. She was shocked. She thought it was Big Sis. Master, are you all right? I Ching asked anxiously. I'm fine. She tilted her head. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Where are you? He looked closely around her but could only see a patch of gray. He could not tell where she was. I don't know. Shining shook her head. I've never been to this place. Stay where you are and don't move. We'll come to find you immediately. Lone Moon did not expect this directionless person to tell him the direction. He directly operated on the light screen to check for her location. As he operated, he also gave Chef a look. The two of them summoned their spirit swords at the same time. They were about to set off to find her. Exalted Masters. A slightly weak voice suddenly sounded behind them. Yun Hung, who could finally speak, raised a hand weakly. I'm here too. Did you forget something? For example, him. The two of them paused. Shit. They really did forget. I Ching then walked over quickly. He scanned him from head to toe, especially the spirit sword stuck in his leg. He frowned and casually pulled it out. Then he conjured a seal to heal the wound on his leg. With a look of disapproval, he reminded, your swordsmanship is not good enough. Don't casually summon a spirit sword to play with. Yun Heng, winky face play? Who was the one who stuck this sword in? Father Nyo, where's master? I Ching directly lifted Yun Heng onto his own sword and turned to look at Lone Moon. A line of red words suddenly popped up on Lone Moon's light screen. Insufficient authority. Unable to search. Shit. Lone Moon suddenly wanted to spit out a mouthful of old blood. What the hell was this authority? He could only give up on locating Shining. He directly asked the person in front of him, Shining, describe what's around you. Shining opened her mouth and said, smog. It's quite serious. Nonsense. Don't use such a general description. Do you think this is the imperial capital? Say something with a signature. Oh. Shining finally looked around and said lazily, I'm sitting on a rock. There's a tree beside me. The kind without leaves. What else? The temperature here is a little low. There's a lot of noise from afar. She suddenly tilted her head and said, there seems to be a few figures in front. They've been standing there like idiots for a long time. Who are they? What kind of clothes are they wearing? I can't see clearly. I already said there's smog. Visibility is very low. Then why don't you walk over and take a look? So troublesome. Shut up. The anger that Lone Moon had been suppressing for a long time suddenly exploded. Who am I doing this for? Besides you, father? No. Before he could finish, I Ching suddenly tapped his shoulder. What? I Ching's expression was a little strange. I might know where master is. What? Lone Moon was shocked. Where is she? How did you find her? The corner of I Ching's mouth twitched. His expression became even more strange. After a while, he raised his hand and pointed in front of him. There. Subconsciously, he looked in the direction that Shining was pointing. But the yin qi around them was too heavy. All he could see was a gray land. I Ching conjured a wind seal out of goodwill. Instantly, a gust of wind swept past, blowing away the thick yin qi in front of him. A few hundred meters away, a familiar figure was sitting on a large black rock with his legs crossed, swaying back and forth. Lone Moon felt something in his mind. Suddenly it snapped. An angry roar rang through the clouds. Shen. Ing? Would it kill you to make AF asterisk king sound? She did it on purpose. She definitely did it. Wait a minute. What did she say just now? There were rocks and trees around them. And there were three idiots standing in front of them. Flip's table. For all, tell me clearly. Who's the idiot? Chapter 391. 5 minutes later. Why are you here? Lone Moon suppressed the urge to beat her up and scanned her from head to toe. She was perfectly fine. See, you had only spoken to him for less than 10 minutes, but she suddenly appeared here thousands of miles away. Oh, someone dragged me here. Shining tilted her head. Who? Shining paused and turned to look at Yun Hung beside her. She took a bite of the fruit that Chef handed to her and said, maybe, it's Rich Ghost? Rich? Song Rin? Lone Moon was shocked. Wasn't he called Mischievous Ghost? Why did he bring you here? Song Ren was a ghost and he carried grievous energy. Chef said before that his grievous energy was easily influenced by remnant souls. The last time the remnant souls attacked the city, his grievous energy exploded once. I don't know. Shining shook her head. Then where is he? I don't know. Shining continued to shake her head. Holy shit, you don't know anything but you came here so obediently? Where's your intelligence? Did I eat all of it? Shining shook her hands. After a while she said, isn't he moldy again? I can't just ignore him. Didn't she just miss him? Moldy? What did she mean? Lone Moon was confused. I Ching beside him thought of something and asked, Master is saying? Song Ren's grievous energy exploded again? Chef frowned. He thought about how Yun Heng's grievous energy disappeared suddenly. That meant that Master suddenly appeared here because of grievous energy too. And from this distance, Song Ren's grievous energy seemed even thicker than before. But why didn't Song Ren's grievous energy have this ability to pull people over from thousands of miles away? Unless, it was because of this place. He looked at the surging yin qi around them and turned to the person beside him. Yun Heng, what kind of place is this northern land? Why is the yin qi still not dissipating even though the remnant souls have entered samsara? Yun Heng paused and answered honestly, well, I don't know the exact reason. It's just that it's been like this since ancient times. It's said that because it's located in a cold area, it easily attracts evil spirits. That's why the yin qi never dissipates. Originally, the northern region wasn't this big, but as time passed, the yin qi became denser and denser, and the number of evil spirits also increased. By the way, he suddenly thought of something and continued, legend has it that most of the evil spirits here didn't eat people. Just that a few hundred years ago, man-eating deviant ghosts suddenly appeared, Hu Shen ancestor then created Shen Men, and completely drove them to this place. He sighed and a trace of pity flashed in his eyes. After a while, he continued, but after that, more and more deviant ghosts appeared, and the area of the northern region became larger and larger. In the end, it became like this. Why are you suddenly asking this? Lone Moon could not help but ask, what are you thinking about? I Ching frowned and explained his guess. If those deviant ghosts can affect Song Ren, then the grievous energy in his body, it might have something to do with the northern region. Lone Moon understood as well. He turned to look at Yun Heng. Where was the place in the north that attracted the evil ghosts and spirits in the beginning? It's in the deepest part of the north. Yun Heng pointed ahead. Lone Moon and I Ching exchanged a look and nodded in unison. Let's go take a look. Whether it was to find out the truth or to find that mischievous ghost. The direction that Yun Heng pointed was where the yin qi was the thickest. I Ching brought Shening with him and Lone Moon pulled Yun Heng with him. They directly flew in on their swords. The deeper they flew, the darker their surroundings became. The yin qi was shockingly thick, and they could even faintly see one or two remnant souls floating past. They were clearly in the human realm, but it felt like they were in the underworld. In fact, the yin qi here was even thicker than in the underworld. Lone Moon's heart sank. Why was there such a place in the human realm? What was going on? Before he could think about it, he suddenly felt the weight on his back lighten. He did not know if he was not used to it, but Yun Heng, who was originally standing on his sword, suddenly screamed and suddenly fell headfirst. Before Lone Moon could react, he had already fallen to the ground. Fortunately, he did not fly too high. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. How could he fall from his sword? This fellow was definitely the most embarrassing soul formation cultivator he had ever seen. Hey, are you alright? I'm fine. Yun Heng rubbed his face and crawled up from the ground. A look of confusion flashed across his eyes. If you can't stand properly, just tell me. I'll set up an array. Exalted Master, it's not that. Yun Heng shook his head. Just now. I think someone pushed me. What? Lone Moon was stunned. Just as he was about to go down to pick him up, he saw that there was a sudden movement under his feet. Be careful. He immediately produced a stream of spirit qi, which directly tied up the person on the ground and pulled him up. The next moment there was a series of swishing sounds. Suddenly rows of densely packed thorns appeared where he was just standing. Each of them emanated a cold yin qi that could easily repel any kind of spirit qi. Yun Heng was shocked and his whole body froze. If Lone Moon had been one step slower just now, he would have been pierced into a skewer by now. There are no fluctuations of array formations here. I Ching used his divine perception to scan the area and shook his head. There are no strange auras either. Lone Moon frowned. So this was just a simple mechanism? And Yun Heng was so unlucky to encounter it. Lone Moon did not pay much attention to it at first. But then, the deeper they flew, Yun Heng seemed to be possessed by the god of misfortune. Wherever he went, he was met with misfortune. One moment he fell into the mud. The next moment he crashed into the stone walls. The next moment he was burned by deviant flames that fell from the sky. Even the remnant souls that floated around occasionally, completely unconscious, would suddenly turn around and kill him, giving him a shock. If not for Lone Moon keeping a close eye on him, he would have fallen to his death countless times. The most important thing was that these disasters seemed to only target him. The other three were completely fine. Not even a single strand of their hair was messed up. Until he fell from the sword for the 101st time. Lone Moon subconsciously conjured a seal to catch the person in midair. It was almost a conditioned reflex to save him. He was just about to pull him up. Beside him, Chef's expression suddenly changed. Father Nyo. In the next moment, several streaks of sword chi were thrown in the direction of the two. Only a few clanging sounds could be heard. Something was bounced off by the sword chi. Lone Moon took a closer look and realized that there was suddenly a lot of black gas around them. It was attacking the few of them with a somewhat violent aura. Grievous energy again. Because the yin chi was too thick, he actually did not notice it at first. His heart sank. Instantly he set up an array around the few of them. Compared to the attack that only targeted Yun Heng just now, this grievous energy was obviously not different. There was more and more grievous energy around them. Faintly they could also hear the shrill cries of ghosts. Quick, look down. Yun Heng, who was pulled back by Lone Moon, pointed to the ground with a pale face. The few of them looked down. They saw that in the originally charred wasteland, a large number of illusory figures suddenly floated out continuously. Their appearances were each more horrifying than the last. Remnant souls? I Ching exclaimed. Chapter 392. Why did so many remnant souls suddenly appear underground? They had only seen one or two along the way. It looked like they were being summoned by the grievous energy. More and more remnant souls emerged from the ground, even more than the previous 2 times. What's more, there were more and more. The ghostly cries were so shrill that it seemed like they were going to pierce their ears. Yun Heng's body swayed. He looked like he could not hold on any longer. Lone Moon immediately conjured a seal, isolating the sound. Thank you, exalted master. Yun Heng's face finally looked better. He looked at the increasing number of remnant souls in front of him and took a deep breath. I will set up an array now and send them into samsara. Wait. He was just about to conjure a seal when Lone Moon stopped him. There are too many of them. You can't handle them. He did not need you to advertise. He directly carried Yun Heng behind his sword and conjured a seal with both hands. In the next moment, a huge reincarnation array appeared under his feet, instantly extending for several kilometers. The yin chi around them dissipated. All the hideous remnant souls slowly became peaceful again. But they did not disappear. Instead, the yin chi surged up again and they became hideous again. Lone Moon was stunned. What's going on? There was nothing wrong with the array. I Ching, however, was stunned. Could it be? He directly activated his assistant's authority and looked around. His eyes widened. The river of forgetfulness is gone. What? Lone Moon was shocked. He subconsciously sensed his assistant's seal. Nothing changed in front of him. It was pitch black everywhere. There was indeed no sign of the river of forgetfulness. Could it be that there are blind spots in the river of forgetfulness? But there were none here? I think. Shining suddenly raised her hand and said, maybe you should use a wide angle. What? The two of them paused. After a while they understood. They released their divine perception and scanned the distance. In the next moment their expressions froze. Holy shit. What the hell? They saw that in a 500-kilometer radius, there were golden rivers everywhere. But those rivers did not flow smoothly from top to bottom. Instead, it was as if it had been cut into countless segments, becoming segments of different lengths. Moreover, they were floating everywhere. Some were on the ground, some were floating in midair, some were standing upright like pillars, and some were twisting like fried dough twists. This didn't look like the river of forgetfulness at all. It looked more like a jigsaw puzzle that was missing many pieces. What's going on here? Lone Moon looked confused. He had never seen such a chaotic river of forgetfulness. Was Shorty on strike? With such a chaotic river of forgetfulness, even if he wanted to restore it, he wouldn't know where to start. Perhaps there will be an answer there. I Ching suddenly pointed to a place in front of them where golden light flashed. Lone Moon looked at it seriously and realized that it was the source of all the chaotic river of forgetfulness. It should be a part of the main branch of the river of forgetfulness that flowed into this small world. It was also the deepest part of the northern region that Yun Heng had mentioned. Chef, you lead the way. Let's take a look. Lone Moon said. I Ching nodded and summoned his sword will. With a dragon's roar, a huge white dragon made of sword chi appeared. It broke through the thick grievous energy and the densely packed remnant souls, clearing a path for them. Only then did the few of them fly out and go straight into the depths. They were very fast. In less than a moment, they arrived at the place where the golden light of the river of forgetfulness was the brightest. They landed and looked around. Apart from the fact that the yin qi was a little thicker, they didn't find anything unusual. Shining. Lone Moon nudged the person beside him. Do you see anything wrong? Why did she feel that something was wrong? Oh, this place should be. She stopped mid-sentence. An inexplicable emotion flashed across her eyes. She tilted her head and said, I don't know. What the hell was shouldn't know? You freaking know. Father Nyo, I believe you. She made a heart gesture. Get lost. Lone Moon glared at her. He thought for a moment and brought up a light screen. He recalled the contents of the instruction manual that was hundreds of gigabytes long. Then he started to operate it slowly. A moment later, rows of data appeared on the screen. He took out a notebook and looked at the notes as he compared them. The more he looked, the darker his expression became. His brows were almost knitted together. Why is the data of this place so messy? What's going on? I Ching asked. This place is different from other places. The data seems to be inverted. If he remembered correctly, I Ching stared blankly. I Ching was stunned. He didn't quite understand what the data meant. He closed his eyes and released his divine perception to sense the aura around him. After a while, his eyes widened in surprise. All kinds of auras are intertwined here, including spirit qi. By right, spirit qi and yin qi and ghost qi were mutually exclusive. In such a heavy yin qi there shouldn't be spirit qi. But not only was there seemed to be immortal qi mixed in. Two exalted masters, what do you mean? Yun Heng was confused. He took a step forward and was about to ask in detail when his bad luck kicked in. He suddenly tripped and fell forward. Just as he was about to hit the ground, Shining, who was standing the furthest away, suddenly appeared beside him and pulled him up. Light bulb, don't smash it. It'll break. Ah. Before Yun Heng could react, he heard a crack under his feet. There was the sound of something cracking. Suddenly, a white light shone from a meter away from his side, which was also the place where he was about to fall. It seemed to tear apart the darkness around them. It became brighter and brighter. In an instant, it surrounded the four of them. Shining sighed softly. There was a misty white light around them. In front of them, there was a faint image of an immortal mountain. Illusion. Lone Moon recognized this sorcery immediately. He subconsciously conjured a seal to break this illusion. Wait. I Ching stopped him. He looked around and said, there's no killing intent in this illusion. It doesn't seem like it's trying to trap us. Instead, it seemed like it was trying to tell them something. Lone Moon then put down his hand. After some thought, he conjured several streams of spirit qi and wrapped them around their wrists to prevent them from getting separated. Especially a certain person who had a terrible sense of direction. He purposely made 2 more rounds. In a short while, the white light in front of them finally dissipated. They were suddenly in another world. The scene in front of them became clearer. When they saw everything in front of them, their eyes narrowed. Holy shit. This was a place with thick spirit qi. There were spirit herbs and spirit plants everywhere. There were floating peaks filled with spirit qi in the air. However, in the middle of those floating peaks there was a huge hole. The sky seemed to have been smashed open. Everything around them was being sucked in crazily. It was as if the whole world was going to be swallowed up. Lone Moon and I Ching's heart sank. They cried out in surprise at the same time. Plane crack. There's also a storm. Shining suddenly added slowly. Chapter 393. What? Lone Moon's heart tightened. So this was a plane storm. He had heard Kai Tian mention before that plane storms were scarier than plane cracks. If they were not dealt with in time, they would grow bigger and bigger until they affected the entire plane. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and fix it. Father Nyo, this is an illusion. I Ching reminded him. Lone Moon stopped in his tracks. Shit, he almost forgot. Wait, if these were all illusions in the illusion, how can an illusion of a plane storm be created here? By right, the things that appeared in the illusion were set up by the person who set up the array to confuse people. But only the 3 of them and Mengpa knew about planes. How could the other party set up an illusion of a real plane storm just based on imagination? Unless the other party had really seen it before. So, this planar storm isn't fake. It happened here before. I Ching thought of this as well. His heart sank as he looked at the black hole in the sky seriously. A plane storm actually appeared in this small world before. How was it dealt with? Before he could think about it, an anxious voice came from behind him. Uncle Master. In the next moment, 2 figures flew over, one in front and one behind. As if they could not see them, they flew past them. Their cultivation levels were not low. They stopped about 10 meters in front of them. "Uncle Master, it's too dangerous here. Let's go back and inform Sect Master and the others first." The man on the left looked at the hole in the sky and suggested anxiously. "It's too late." The other person shook his head. "If we don't block this hole, it will get bigger and bigger. It will drag the entire world in." "But, Disciple Nephew Chui, hurry and inform the sect. Evacuate the residents within a radius of 50 kilometers. I'll go block it first." With that said, the person turned and flew in the direction of the plane storm. "Uncle Master." The other person clenched his fists by his side. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and go back to inform the sect. The person stopped about 10 meters away from the storm. He steadied himself and began to conjure a seal with his hands. In an instant, a huge array appeared in front of him and flew towards the hole. It seemed to be trying to seal the hole that kept swallowing everything around it. However, it was a planar storm after all. How could he deal with it? The array formation collapsed in less than a second. That person changed a few more array formations, but none of them worked. Instead, it caused the hole in the sky to grow larger and larger. Although he knew that these were probably images that had already happened, Lone Moon could not help but be curious about how this plane storm was resolved by him. Sure enough, after a short while, when the man had tried dozens of spells to no avail, he clenched his fists and stood in the air for a while. Suddenly, as if he had made up his mind about something, he clenched his teeth and summoned a spirit sword, and directly stabbed it into his chest. Holy shit! Lone Moon was shocked by his sudden move. Was he going to give up because he couldn't make up for it? However, in the next moment, the blood in his chest suddenly gushed out like a fountain, as if it was drawn by something. In an instant, it gathered into a huge blood array. Only when the last drop of blood flowed out did his figure fall, but a translucent phantom floated out from his body. He still maintained the posture of forming the seal. This was dual cultivation of soul and magic. Amazing. The array was activated and red light filled the sky. The white shadow and the sky full of red light formed a strange scene. Even the pitch-black plane gap behind them was reflected in a sea of red. Lone Moon's eyes widened, and he looked in disbelief at the person who had stabbed him without hesitation. He was going to sacrifice his soul. Wasn't this a little too desperate? In order to block that hole, he was sacrificing his own soul, but that was a plain storm. Even so, he might not be able to look at the river of forgetfulness. I Ching suddenly reminded. Lone Moon was stunned and subconsciously looked down. The river of forgetfulness in the illusion was normal, but the moment the array was activated, the originally calm surface of the river suddenly began to move violently. It constantly set off layers of golden waves, and finally, as if it was drawn by something, it turned into countless golden lights and gathered towards the array. In a short while, the originally red sacrifice soul array turned into a sheet of golden light, and flew towards that hole. He wants to use the power of the river of forgetfulness to block that hole. Lone Moon finally understood his plan, but only Mengpa could control the river of forgetfulness. No wonder he wanted to sacrifice his own soul. But even so, he was afraid that the blood array that had turned golden had already completely covered the hole in the sky, but it still did not completely block it. Instead, the suction from inside that swallowed everything became stronger and stronger, and even the array was beginning to distort. That person's soul was already becoming fainter and fainter, and could not hold on for much longer. He gritted his teeth and his hand seal changed. As the earth shook, the river of forgetfulness below was suddenly cut off, and slowly rose into the sky and surged directly into the array. Finally, the hole in the plane storm began to shrink, and the pitch-black hole slowly closed in towards the center. But that person was already at his limit, and his figure was about to disappear. If this went on before the hole was sealed, the entire array would collapse. At this critical moment, suddenly there was a cry from below. Help! Perhaps because of the movement of the array just now, a figure in green suddenly entered the gravitational range of the plane storm, and was hugging a tree with all his might, trying to climb out. The person in the sky could no longer hold on, and a trace of pain flashed across his eyes. As if he had made a decision, he directly sent a ray of spirit chi over and pulled that person over. The person who was pulled over suddenly paused. Thank you, you're saving. I'm sorry. Before the other person could finish speaking, that person suddenly closed his eyes as if he could not bear to watch, and sent a ray of spirit chi towards the other person's heart. The other person did not even have time to react, and his soul was directly shaken out. That person's hand turned, and the other person's soul immediately turned into spots of fluorescent light, and entered his almost transparent body. After fusing with the other person's soul, his virtual shadow finally became a little more solid. He continued to make seals, and the array once again shone with golden light. The hole that had already shrunk closed even faster. In less than 7 minutes, the hole in the plane storm that could swallow the heavens and the earth finally disappeared. And the soul of that person who set up the array was already so thin that it could not be seen. Finally, with a ding, it turned into spots of fluorescent light, one on the left, one on the right, and directly returned to the river of forgetfulness below. I Ching. Lone Moon, Yun Heng, did they just witness a tragic salvation of the world? The few people who were watching the show were silent for a while. Before they could sort out their emotions, the scene in front of them changed again. Chapter 394. Compared to the immortal mountain and blessed land from before, the image now was clearly that of the mortal realm. The people walking around were all mortals without spirit chi. This seemed to be a family. Although it was not a wealthy family, it looked like a family that did not have to worry about food and clothing. A young child ran past him, giggling. He looked very unfamiliar, but at first glance, the few of them inexplicably recognized that this person in front of them was the green-robed man who had almost been swept into the plane storm and had his soul sacrificed by the cultivator who had saved the world. So this was his reincarnation after his soul was repaired by the power of samsara? The few of them were stunned and became even more confused. They could not understand the purpose of this illusion and could only continue watching. However, what happened next in the illusion caused them to have mixed feelings. The green-robed man was called Wen Tianyu in this life, and he was the son of a merchant. His biggest wish in life was to earn enough money and marry the most beautiful girl in the city. From the age of 10, every bit of money he earned, he would bury it in a jar like it was a treasure. And he did have the talent to earn money. Before the age of 20, he already owned an entire street of shops in the city and became the richest man in the city. Everything was perfect, but on the day he was about to marry the girl he loved, everything came to an abrupt end. Someone had come to the city, and it was an immortal who had descended from the sky. They said that Wen Tianyu was a person with great opportunities and that one day he would achieve enlightenment and ascend. Tianyu did not want to go, nor did he want to cultivate. But his parents said that this was his fate, his friends said that he had good luck, and even the girl he liked said that he was an extraordinary person. Everyone felt that he should walk the path of immortality. Tianyu had no choice but to go. The number one genius of the immortal sect, Supremacy Wending, wanted to take him as a disciple and promised that he would be his only disciple. All the cultivators were envious of his good luck. But he was not willing at all. He did not know why, but he inexplicably did not like that person. He even wanted to stay away from him when he saw him. He had a feeling that something bad would happen. He did not expect that this feeling would become reality a few months later. A huge black hole suddenly appeared in the sky. Only Honorable Wending's array could block that hole. Otherwise, the whole world would be destroyed. However, this array formation required the sacrifice of a soul. Unfortunately, his soul alone was not enough to activate the array formation. He needed to find someone with a similar soul to him to sacrifice to the array formation. Only then could the array formation be activated. Wen Tianyu was that person. He suddenly understood why everyone insisted on him cultivating even though he had a trash spirit root. But he didn't want to die. He was afraid. He wanted to escape. He didn't want his soul to scatter. But he didn't have the chance. His escape plan had been seen through. In a single night, the expressions of his fellow disciples who were originally kind and protective of him had all changed. All of them were scolding him for being selfish, for not recognizing the greater good, and for being ungrateful. The sect leader said, "We are cultivators and we should protect the righteousness of the world. How can you abandon the lives of the world for your own selfishness?" His fellow disciple said, "I thought that even if you had poor aptitude, the Venerable One would still take a liking to you. I didn't expect that. I was wrong about you." Cultivators from other sects said, "You are also one of the living beings in this world. How can you bear to see the lives in misery? Once you leave, you will destroy this world." His parents said, The immortal elders are right. How can you be so selfish? Since you are already an immortal cultivator, you should be like Venerable Wending and disregard life and death." The girl he liked said, "How can you be like this? You are no longer the brother Tianyu that I know." Everyone told him that he shouldn't escape. Everyone told him that he should sacrifice to the array formation. Everyone told him that he had to die. But he didn't want to. He named himself Tianyu, but the heavens seemed to no longer protect him. In the end he was still pushed onto the altar. He watched as his best friend pushed the spirit sword into his chest. He watched as his blood flowed out bit by bit and gathered to form the array formation. He watched as his soul slowly dissipated, but he couldn't resist at all. Until the moment before he disappeared, he heard the familiar voice of Venerable Wending, who was also about to dissipate. "I'm sorry." His remnant soul, which had originally turned into a fluorescent light, was instantly filled with resentment. But both of them returned to the river of forgetfulness. Then came the third life, because his remnant soul was reincarnated with resentment, when Tianyu unexpectedly had the memories of his previous life. His monstrous hatred made him fall into the demonic path since he was young. He was determined to kill all the cultivators in the world to avenge himself. He practiced the most dangerous forbidden technique and the most vicious mental cultivation method. He suffered all the hardships in the world and finally cultivated to become a sky fiend. He gathered tens of thousands of demons and attacked the immortal sect. But in the end he failed at the last moment. He met a person who was born with good fortune and was covered in the golden light of merit. His cultivation was clearly far from his, but he still died under his monstrous luck and his soul was sacrificed once again. The funny thing was, he only recognized who the other person was at the last moment. He recognized where the merit on him came from. It was actually the merit of saving the world. Both of them sacrificed their souls, but he was spurned by the world and scolded by the cultivators. But his name was immortalized and he received the sincere gratitude of everyone. He had the merit of saving the world. It turned out that he was not only fighting against the cultivators of the righteous sects, but also against fate and the heavens. Finally he completely lost hope. He only hoped that the heavens would let him go once and let him have a peaceful life. Then, he ushered in his fourth life. He did not suffer much in this life. He did not have the memories of his previous life, and there was no longer that terrifying black hole in the world. He was just an ordinary scholar. In order to obtain scholarly honors, he deliberately moved and lived in a quiet house in the forest more than 10 miles away from the county. One day, a dozen mystic cultivators in yellow Taoist robes ran through the small path outside the forest. Behind them, there was a strong yin qi as if something was chasing after them. The group of people hurriedly took out a voice transmission talisman to ask for help. After a while, a gentle male voice came from the talisman. "The county is in front of you. You cannot let deviant ghosts enter the city and harm the people. Use the restriction talisman to temporarily seal them in the forest behind." "Yes, Heavenly Master." Thus, the deviant ghosts swarmed into the forest and ate the only living person in it to death. Not even his bones were left. The scholar turned into a ghost. His soul body was about to be divided by thousands of remnant souls. Even he himself did not know why the monstrous resentment was completely unleashed, and it was endless. After being swallowed by the resentment, there was only one thought in his mind. He wanted an answer. He wanted to seek justice. He wanted to ask why. But, even he himself had forgotten why he had to ask and who he should ask. So he rushed out of the encirclement of remnant souls, out of this world, and broke through the rules of heaven and earth. Then, he appeared in front of the manager. Shining, Lone Moon, I Ching. He finally understood why these illusions appeared. The three of them were silent for a while. Then they all turned to look at Yun Heng, whose face was pale as if he had suffered a huge blow. Coincidentally, the scholar was called Song Ren, and the heavenly master in the voice transmission talisman was surnamed Yun. Chapter 395. The sudden truth stunned the few of them, especially Yun Heng. His entire body started to shake. He stood rooted to the ground for a long time, as if he had lost his divine soul. But the surrounding illusions turned and returned to the scene of Song Ren's first life. It was like a movie that was playing on loop. I Ching and Lone Moon's expressions were complicated. They finally knew where Song Ren's strange hatred towards Yun Heng came from. There was also the endless stream of grievous energy that even Shorty could not get rid of. Why was it that he could only get rid of it when Shining was around? Subconsciously he probably still wanted to seek justice. Even the heavenly Tao could not give him justice. Only Shining could. Yet in this matter, it was impossible to tell who was right and who was wrong. His tragic fourth life was indeed pitiful. But no matter which life it was, what Yun Heng did was indeed a great thing to save the world. If he did not stop the plane storm, perhaps not just Song Ren, but everyone in the small world would probably die. Even their souls would be lost in the cracks between planes, never to be reincarnated. Yun Heng chose the best way. He even sacrificed himself time and time again. He risked his soul to save the world. So he received the sincere gratitude of everyone in the world. He received a body full of merit and blessings from the heavens. He was favored by the heavens in every life. From the perspective of justice, no one could say that his choice was wrong. Even if he sacrificed Song Ren. Compared to the whole world, one person was too small. So everyone chose to ignore his voice. Everyone forgot to ask him if he was willing or not. Yun Heng might have let down everyone in the world, but he had let down Song Ren. Why didn't Moldy Ghost's body light up? Shining tilted her head and suddenly asked a question. I Ching paused for a moment. Knowing that Lone Moon was asking about merit, he explained in a low voice, "Master, although doing good deeds can accumulate merit, there is no specific boundary between good and evil. Therefore, only by receiving sincere gratitude from others can one obtain merit." Shining frowned. So, no one has ever been grateful to Moldy Ghost? I Ching did not reply, and his expression darkened. In his first life, no one knew that he had a part in saving the world. In his second life he was forced to the altar by everyone. In his third life there was no need to talk about him. He was a great devil to begin with. Not to mention gratitude, there were countless people who hated him. That was why he became more and more unlucky in each life. Yet, because of the fusion of their souls in the first life, he and Yun Heng had a connection. They would be entangled together in every life. "Hey, what do you plan to do about this?" Lone Moon nudged Shining and pointed at Yun Heng, who was still in a daze. Huh? Shining looked confused. "What does this have to do with me?" What ah? Lone Moon glared at her. "This illusion is very clear. Song Ren is looking for you to uphold justice." "Sigh, so troublesome your sister. We have to solve it, right? What should we do?" Shining tilted her head and thought for a moment. "How about cold dressing?" This kind of world-class conundrum was really taxing on the brain. "Speaking of coleslaw, I suddenly remembered that I haven't had dinner yet. Did Chef bring any stock? So hungry." "Yes, Master will be ready soon." I Ching nodded vigorously. Very professionally he took out 4, 5, 6, 10 dishes from his storage bag. He even set down the table, chairs, bowls and chopsticks. He gestured for Shining to take a seat first. With a twist of his hand, he summoned the true phoenix fire. With a sizzling sound, the dishes that were originally a little cold became hot in an instant. An alluring aroma wafted out. "Master, we can eat now. Cook that plate of pork knuckle a little more. I like crispy ones." "Yes, Master, no problem, Master." Lone Moon, son of AB***, at least take a look at where you are right now. We are still in an illusion. Do you think you are watching a movie? You are eating at a table in front of everyone? He had the urge to flip the table. He glanced at a certain someone who was already eating. The corner of his mouth twitched. After a while, he sat down at the table and waited for her to finish eating. In the originally dangerous and unpredictable illusion, the scene changed. The three of them sat around the table and ate crazily. Not far away, a person stood motionless in a daze. "Hey, I say, recently, have you been eating more and more?" "Chef, give me one more bowl." "Yes, Master, no problem, Master." 2 hours later, Shining, who had finally finished eating, glanced at Yun Heng, who had finally regained his senses. He was kneeling in front of her with a determined look on his face. "Have you decided?" "Yes." He cupped his fists in response. All the shock and confusion from before were gone. "I have already remembered what happened in my previous lives. Exalted Masters, please, no. Exalted Immortals, please grant me my wish. You have to think clearly." Lone Moon stepped forward and reminded him in a low voice. "You originally had the potential to ascend. If you give up now, in your next life, no, you may never be able to ascend. I did all that not to become an immortal." He smiled. It was different from the kind smile he had before. Instead he looked a little relieved. "What's more, I am the one who wronged him. The justice that he wants should naturally be paid by me." Lone Moon frowned. Seeing his insistence, he could only sigh. After a while he could not help but ask, "In those previous lives, do you regret it?" "No." He did not even hesitate as he shook his head. "If I could do it all over again, I would still choose to do the same." In the face of righteousness, sacrifice is inevitable, even if I have to bear more hatred. It's just that. I hope that I can have a chance to make it up to him. At that moment, Lone Moon did not know how to evaluate this matter. He was clearly a good person. For 4 lives, he had taken it upon himself to save the world. He even sacrificed himself time and time again. Yet he was the one who caused Song Ren's soul to dissipate again and again. His resentment soared to the heavens. This is already the best idea I can think of. Yun Heng clenched his fists by his side and said, even if it might be meaningless, at least give him a fair chance. All right. Shining nodded and glanced at Chef beside her. Only then did I Ching conjure a seal with one hand. A beam of white light flew out from his hand, and there was a loud clang. The entire illusion immediately broke into thousands of pieces and disappeared like a broken mirror. They once again returned to the northern region that was filled with Yin Qi. However, there was an additional black figure hovering in the air a few meters in front of them. He floated in the air, surrounded by pitch-black resentment that was as dark as ink, carrying a violent and crazy aura. Although they could not see his figure clearly, they could feel that there were two sharp, blade-like gazes directed at Yun Heng, as if they were going to pierce through him. Yun Heng took a few steps forward and looked up at the black figure in the air. He could not tell what emotions he was feeling. Guilt, regret, or relief, there were all sorts of emotions. He stared at the black figure for a while, then said in a low voice, I know it's too late to do anything now, but I hope to give you a chance to start over. As soon as he finished speaking, the black figure in the air seemed to have lost control. Suddenly, it turned into a black fog, covering the sky and earth as it pounced towards Yun Heng. Like a sharp blade, it pierced several holes in Yun Heng's body. Glaring fresh blood stained his entire body. But with his last breath, Yun Heng conjured a seal with both hands. In the next moment, a red light lit up. The blood in his body surged out crazily, directly turning into chains that trapped the entire ball of resentment chi. A huge golden array appeared in the air, covering the two people below. Yun Heng's hands did not stop moving, quickly conjuring array seals. Then he said word by word, I am willing to use my blood to build your vitality, I am willing to use my soul to forge your divine soul. I sacrifice everything I have in exchange for your rebirth. Chapter 396. Suddenly the golden light shone brightly. The grievous aura in the surroundings seemed to be attracted by something and began to surge into Yun Heng's body. And a nearly transparent soul floated out of the grievous aura and slowly rose into the golden array above. Yun Heng's body also began to float out. Specks of fluorescent light from the soul gathered on the soul above. Song Ren's almost transparent soul, which had been swallowed by the grievous aura, began to solidify at a speed visible to the naked eye. Traces of red blood chi also began to gather towards the other party. That solidified soul immediately became alive. Finally, it changed from a ghost soul to a living soul. Only then did Yun Heng stop. His entire body was clearly surrounded by grievous aura, but his mouth revealed a sliver of a smile. I'm sorry. The grievous aura on his body was instantly purified. His entire body also became fainter and fainter. In the next moment it completely disappeared. Only a speck of fluorescent light floated out. Lone Moon conjured a seal and kept the last remnant of Yun Heng's soul. He sighed. This time he did not know how long he had to stay in the river of forgetfulness before he had a chance to reincarnate. I Ching also conjured a seal towards Song Ren, who had already turned into a living soul. In the next moment, that solidified soul turned into a ball of light and flew into his palm. What do you plan to do with this living soul? Lone Moon asked. Although Song Ren had already turned into a living soul, his body had long been eaten clean by deviant ghosts. His soul could not return to his body. Before long he would become a ghost again. Father Nyo, do you still have Radish's dandelion? I Ching suddenly asked. You still use dandelion? Lone Moon's eyes widened. Wasn't this a little too much? Wasn't it enough to have an eyesore at home? He was attached to Radish's flower previously. His soul was already infected with his immortal chi. So using that illusion is the best. And the current situation did not allow them to think of any other way. Otherwise they would have wasted Yun Heng's efforts. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Still, he took out a flower from the storage bag beside him and handed it over. I Ching immediately conjured a seal to set up an array. In a short while, a human figure slowly formed in the array. He placed the living soul in his hand into the array. In a short while the array light faded. There was one more person on the ground. Compared to the appearance of Radish before, the human figure now was exactly the same as his soul. However, because he had just been reborn he would not be able to wake up for a while. Done. Shining clapped her hands. We can go home and eat. Get back here. Lone Moon grabbed a certain person who was about to escape and pointed at the disorderly river of forgetfulness and the sky full of Qi. You call this settled? Father Nyo, shut up. Lone Moon glared at her. Before this river of forgetfulness recovers, none of you can escape. Ah, so troublesome. Troublesome my ass. I didn't ask you to do anything. Just stay here and don't King run around. With that said, he glanced at I Ching beside him. Chef, call Shorty over to help too. I Ching nodded and took out his communication talisman. Lone Moon scanned the surroundings once more. The river of forgetfulness was strewn all over the place like hanging noodles. Instantly he felt his head hurt even more. The plane crack was something that even the God Fiend could only seal temporarily with the help of primordial chaos and the others from another plane. No matter what, Yunheng was just a mortal. If he could solve it with just his sacrificial soul, Kai Tian would not have had to look for a manager so frantically. Yunheng only used the power of the river of forgetfulness to cover it temporarily. The gap had always been there. This layer of cover was still very weak. It would not be long before it reappeared. And because he forcefully borrowed the power of the river of forgetfulness, it also caused chaos in the river of forgetfulness of this world. It disrupted the reincarnation of this world. So a fault was formed here that one could only enter but not exit. What's more, this river of forgetfulness was a part of the main branch of this small world. In other words, it was possible that half of the souls that flowed through here were forced to stay here. And because the river of forgetfulness was distorted, it caused their souls to collapse and become remnant souls. And there were more and more remnant souls. That should be how the northern land was formed. Although remnant souls had no consciousness, they would instinctively want to return to the river of forgetfulness. That was why these remnant souls would attack the mortal territories in a frenzy. Because only the river of forgetfulness could allow them to re-enter reincarnation. Yet they were intercepted by mystic cultivators who did not know the truth and did not let them enter. They could not reincarnate and could not return to the river of forgetfulness. It was no wonder that they would produce grievances. It was not strange that they became violent and man-eating. The only solution was to let the river of forgetfulness return to its original state and send all remnant souls into reincarnation. The most important thing was to patch up that plane gap. But there were really too many faults in the river of forgetfulness here. And they were scattered everywhere. Even with Shorty around, he and I Ching spent a long time before they slowly pulled those messy rivers back. That's right, 2 people. Not including a certain troublemaker who watched the whole show and ate melon seeds. Aya, aren't I guarding the moldy ghost? He hasn't woken up yet. What if he gets moldy again? Shining said seriously. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. You're just King lazy. Song Rin was already reborn and not a ghost. How could he get moldy? It's done. Before Lone Moon could fly into a rage, I Ching pulled the last half of the river of forgetfulness back to its original position. The entire river of forgetfulness was finally restored and started to flow again. Beside him, Shorty also waved toward the sky full of Qi. She was Mingpa after all. Instantly, countless lights lit up. Thousands of remnant souls returned to the river of forgetfulness. The Qi dissipated completely. As if the clouds had been pulled out to see the sun, the surroundings suddenly shone with bright light. The originally dark and gloomy northern land was instantly lit up. Although it was still a piece of scorched earth, it no longer had the gloomy aura of the past. There were still some wisps of spirit chi in the air. Thinking about it carefully, it was normal. Looking at Yunheng's first life in the illusion, he knew that the spirit chi of this small world should not be less than that of other small worlds. But later on the plane gap appeared. Together with the chaos in the river of forgetfulness, it affected this world. That was why the spirit chi became thinner and thinner. Finally, it caused the inheritance of cultivators to be cut off. Now that the river of forgetfulness was restored, naturally the spirit chi would return. Only he looked up. Indeed, in the next moment the air twisted. A pitch-black hole suddenly appeared, as if the sky was being torn apart. He subconsciously turned to look at a certain foodie beside him. But he saw her clenching her fists and making an encouraging gesture. All the best, Father Nyo. You can do it. Get lost. You just don't want to do it, right? Thinking about it carefully, that assistant handbook that he spent a few months to understand, he indeed wanted to give it a try. So he turned to look at I Ching. Chef, you go left and I'll go right. Let's try using the sky-mending array. I Ching nodded, turned and flew to the left. Lone Moon flew to the right. The two of them activated the array at the same time and directly turned on the assistant authority. Indeed, in the next moment, A strange power spread throughout his body and flowed into that array. They saw that pitch-black hole in the middle slowly shrink and become smaller and smaller. In less than half a fruit's time, that black hole had completely disappeared. Even that violent suction force was completely gone. Chapter 397. Lone Moon brought up the plane data to take a look, then took out a small notebook to compare. When he found that the data was the same and there would be no more gaps, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like the assistant handbook was right. The plane assistant had the ability to repair the plane. The props like the bandages that Xining gave him previously were only supplementary. Hashtag on the importance of reading the user manual. Hashtag I Ching was stunned too. He did not think that array formations could really solve the plane gap. He thought about it carefully. When Master used Radish's dandelion to repair the hundreds of plane cracks, she did not seem to use any special props. Suddenly he thought of something and looked up at Lone Moon. Father Nyo, I think recently Master. I know. Lone Moon did not wait for him to finish and nodded directly. He turned back to look at Xining, who was trying to wake the unlucky ghost on the ground with a stick. A trace of worry flashed across his eyes. She will say it when she wants to. Lone Moon flew back and picked up the corpse on the ground. Things are settled. Let's go back. Back to the immortal realm? Shorty was stunned. But aren't Uncle Master Cu and the others still here? Let's bring the moldy Songren back to the immortal realm first. Songren's illusory body was formed from Radish's dandelion. He was also a living soul. Once he entered the body, the illusory body became his real body. In a sense, he was already an immortal body. But he had never cultivated before, so he could not stay in this small world. He could only bring him back. Lone Moon sent a message to Cu and the others as he opened the realm gate in the sky. No one hesitated. I Ching brought Xining and flew over on his sword. Lone Moon carried the still unconscious Songren and hesitated for a moment. Then he flew in too. Why did he feel like he forgot something? He could not remember it. Forget it, it was not important anyway. Not far away, the red-black couple who had just escaped from the grievous Qi. Winky faced their hearts hurt. Songren woke up. Perhaps because of his previous experience, the illusory body that I Ching created merged very well with his soul. There was no rejection at all. But because he was not familiar with the use of immortal Qi, he still needed others to transfer immortal Qi to him to maintain his human form. Other than that, there were no other problems. But, who are you? He looked at the people in front of him blankly. After a while he looked at himself. Who am I? I Ching, Lone Moon, Xining. Lone Moon's expression changed. He scanned I Ching from head to toe. I Ching grabbed I Ching's hand and released a sliver of God power to check I Ching's primordial spirit. A moment later he shook his head. I'm fine. I Ching's soul showed no signs of grievance. Only then did everyone heave a sigh of relief. They had thought that he had lost his memory due to the influence of resentment just like last time. Now it seemed that he had let it go. Yunheng risked his soul to be destroyed in exchange for his rebirth. Finally Yunheng forgave him and let him go. It was better to forget everything now. You really don't remember it all? His expression became even more confused. He tried hard to think, but after a while he shook his head. I don't remember anything at all. Who am I? Where is this place? This is the invincible heavenly palace. You. Lone Moon hesitated. After a while he said, You are a new disciple of my invincible sect. You had just started cultivating when something went wrong. That's why you were injured, seriously injured. Your body can't be used anymore. So we attached you to a dandelion. You're fine now. Just focus on cultivating in the future. A dandelion? I Ching looked shocked. He did not doubt what Lone Moon said. Then you are? Of course we are your teachers. I am the sect's managing elder, Lone Moon. He pointed to the other two. That's the sect master eating the fruit. The one who passed the fruit is Chef, Elder I Ching. As for the rest of the sect, I will send someone to introduce you to them later. Only then did he nod his head. He still had a puzzled look on his face, and was about to ask something else when the door was pushed open with a bang. Little Missy. A certain vegetable rushed in like a cannonball. He scanned the room and his eyes fixed on Xining. He pounced on her. You're finally back. Seeing that he was about to pounce on her, I Ching, who was at the side, was very calm and natural. He silently stretched out a leg. The next moment, Radish lost his footing and fell to the ground. The dandelions in his hands scattered all over the room. Radish was obviously used to falling. He threw away the flower stalks in his hands and was too lazy to get up. He sat on the ground and tugged at the corner of Xinying's clothes. Little Missy, Radish misses you so much. When you weren't around, no one watered me. Look. He pulled at his hair and said with a pitiful look, my leaves are split. Xinying slowly finished eating the fruit in her hand. She replied, oh. Little Missy, how could you leave just like that? You didn't even bring Radish to play? He felt even more wronged. Radish is about to grow mushrooms? Why is this ugly thing back? He saw Song Ren at the side and sized him up. His face was full of disdain. He remembered this person who ruined Big Sister Little Hong's dual cultivation ceremony. He confirmed with his eyes that this was an annoying person. You came at the right time. Lone Moon stepped forward. He will be a disciple of our sect in the future. Bring him around the sect and familiarize him. Ask Lan Hua to make arrangements for him. I'm not going. Radish rejected directly. He wasn't Little Missy. He didn't like it. Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He wanted to stew it at any moment. His true body is also a plant. You are considered the same as him. If you don't take care of him, who will? Really? Radish hesitated for a moment. He stood up and looked at him. Indeed, he felt the spirit chi of the plants on him. It was very familiar. Suddenly he felt that he wasn't that ugly anymore. He looked at him even more seriously. This is? Song Ren felt goosebumps from his stare. He subconsciously looked at Lone Moon beside him. Don't you remember? He's Radish. He's the sect's. He thought for a moment before giving an adjective. Pet. What was a pet? You're from the same sect as him. Regarding cultivation you can ask. Forget it. You should ask Lan Hua. Radish's mischievous personality was a bad influence. Oh yes, your body was given to you by Radish. My body? Song Ren was shocked. He looked at Radish in disbelief. His eyes widened. Many complicated emotions flashed across his face. After a while, he nodded heavily. I understand. He then took a step forward. Gritting his teeth, he seemed to have made up his mind about something. He cupped his fists in the direction of Radish and called out respectfully. Dad. Lone Moon, I Ching, Xinying, Radish, for all, Nanny. Chapter 398. Radish did not expect that when it went to send flowers to Little Missy every day, it would bring a son. As a sexist person, Radish did not like the sudden appearance of a son, mainly because he was not a Little Missy. Until Lone Moon told him that out of the hundreds of disciples in Invincible Sect, he was the first to have a son, the only one in the entire heavenly palace and very precious. Only then did he put away his temper and happily accept the dandelion, with the intention of teaching it everything he knew. But because of Song Ren's amnesia, he accepted the fact that he was a plant spirit very quickly. Not only did he follow Radish everywhere and bully the immortal cranes, he also followed Radish to the back of the mountain to squat in the pit every day, waiting for people to come and water it. Therefore, the disciples of the sect soon discovered that the person who would not rest until he caused a ruckus in the sect every day was a dandelion besides the Radish. Every day, he would either pluck the fur of a spirit beast or pluck the flower of a newly bloomed immortal herb. Lone Moon could not help but wonder if the decision to acquiesce to the relationship between the two was a little rash, just to make it easier for Song Ren to cultivate. But there were too many things to do in the sect, he could not spare any attention. In addition, he had to go down to the lower realm from time to time to take care of the previous small world and the progress of the cultivator's studies. The matter of the river of forgetfulness had been resolved, and the spirit chi in that world was beginning to recover. Of course, the matter of imparting Tao and cultivating had to continue. Otherwise, if they went to the river of forgetfulness at every turn and created another northern land full of remnant souls, they would really be busy to death. Apart from Lan Hua and Shorty, Siyu was the disciple with the highest cultivation level in the sect. She was already half a step to exalted immortal. With her around, Lone Moon could rest assured. It was just that once they went down to the lower realm, the sect naturally lacked manpower. And it was time for the immortal herb trade with the various continents that happened once every 100 years. He was so busy that his feet did not even touch the ground. Only then did he realize that something seemed to be missing. Holy shit. Yu Hong was still in the lower realm. No wonder the red and black couple who had been in the lower realm for a few months were finally brought back. You're saying that you're trapped in the north by grievous energy? Lone Moon glanced at the exhausted couple who had just been brought back. Elder. Yu Hong's face was full of guilt. I was not skilled enough. That's why I was trapped by the grievous energy and could not report back in time. Please punish me, sect master and elder. Madam, how can I blame you? Before Lone Moon could speak, Little Black, who was at the side, immediately said worriedly, who would have thought that the grievous energy was so strong? We didn't even have time to react before we were pulled down to the lower realm and trapped in that damn place. But if my cultivation level was high enough, the two of us wouldn't be so helpless. We wouldn't have to trouble sect leader to find us personally. Yu Hong's face was still full of guilt. According to what you said, this matter should be your husband's fault. Little Black pulled her hand and said apologetically, I didn't protect you well, which caused us to be trapped by resentment. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Little Black. Yu Hong glared at him. This is our sex matter. Don't mess around. I don't care. Little Black tightened his grip on her hand and said affectionately, I'm a member of Invincible Sect since I married you. I'm your devil in life and your dead devil in death. If you want to punish me together. If you want to die, enough, the two of you. Lone Moon could not help but interrupt the two of them. If you want to show off your affection, can you do it in the house? We don't want to eat it. Yu Hong, you're saying that in the few months you were in the lower realm, you were trapped in the north and never left? Yes. Yu Hong nodded. That place was full of yin qi and there was no daylight. Little Black and I couldn't get rid of the grievous energy, and we didn't dare to rush out. Then were you injured? Lone Moon's heart sank. It was Song Ren's grievous energy that pulled them down to the lower realm. That grievous energy could rush up to the immortal realm. Little Black aside, it would be difficult for Yu Hong to resist it with her cultivation level. Most importantly, she was trapped for a few months. I didn't. She seemed to have thought of something as her face turned red. She glanced at Little Black beside her before continuing. Fortunately, Little Black has a Dharma treasure that can temporarily open up a small mystic realm. So, for the past few months, the two of us have been in that mystic realm and have not been injured by the resentment. Then we sensed that the surrounding yin qi had disappeared, so we left the mystic realm. Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief as long as she was not injured. Don't worry, madam. Little Black immediately smiled like a flower and said affectionately, as long as your husband is here, I won't let you get hurt no matter what. With that said, he grabbed her hand and kissed it. Yu Hong's blush deepened. She looked up and looked at him. Immediately, their eyes met and pink bubbles seemed to appear all around them. Everyone could vaguely hear the sound of dog food falling. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He hurriedly waved his hand to chase them away. All right. The two of you can go and rest. Yu Hong, remember to take stock of those immortal herbs in the afternoon. Yes, elder. The two of them looked at each other again. Then, holding hands, they turned and walked out of the hall. Immediately, the entire hall was filled with a pink aura. Even Shining, who was sitting at the top and nibbling on a fruit, felt the smell of dog food. So she narrowed her eyes and turned to look at Boss Lon, who was criticizing her taste in clothes and forcing her to wear Dharma clothes. She suddenly said, Boss Lon? What? Is grievous energy more powerful than your demonic chi? You must be joking. His expression was as if she was looking down on him. Which one of the most powerful yin qi in the world can compare to demonic qi? All kinds of yin qi and grievous energy are like toys in the eyes of demons. Once the demonic qi is released, it can be dispelled in minutes. Oh, Shining gave a long response and continued to nibble on her fruit as if nothing had happened. But the two of them who had just walked to the door stopped in their tracks. The pink bubbles surrounding him burst into pieces in an instant. Some kind of cold aura was emitting from Yu Hong's body and rushing towards Little Black. Madam? Little Black's little heart trembled and his legs turned to jelly. Madam, listen to my explanation. Little Black. A roar sounded and the entire hall shook. Yu Hong's originally delicate figure suddenly turned into a metal Barbie. How dare you lie to me? With that said, she picked up a certain demon king who was trembling beside her and threw him out. Madam? Before he could finish speaking, he turned into a small black dot in the sky. Yu Hong's figure also flashed and disappeared at the door. It was obvious that she was chasing after him to beat him up. The hall fell silent. 3 pairs of eyes turned to look at a certain foodie above them. What's the matter? Shining looked innocent, pure and kind as if she knew nothing. Is it time to eat? I Ching, Lone Moon, Lan Hua, the corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Do you know what it means to not expose the truth when life is hard? Uh, Xining tilted her head. Forget it, eat your food. Although Little Black was very pitiful, why did he feel so good for some reason? Oh. She then continued to nibble on her fruit. She felt that it was even more fragrant, the kind that didn't taste like dog food. Chapter 399. Little Black did not appear in the sect for a whole month after this beating. Yu Hong seemed to be really angry. Every time Little Black tried to crawl back, she would find out and throw it out mercilessly. Even the other demons that came and went were not friendly. The only thing missing was a sign at the heavenly gate saying that demons and dogs were not allowed in. Lone Moon finally felt a little more relaxed. He had thought that he would have to give the newlyweds a wedding leave or something. Now it seemed like he could save the trouble. But although the matter in the sect was resolved, something else came up. What's this? Xining poked the colorful bird on the table. Hong Ming sent it. He said that it's the first phoenix that appeared in their plane. Lone Moon explained casually. Phoenix? Xining turned to look at Chef beside her. It just looks similar. I Ching glanced at the bird on the table. This is a beast without sentience. At most it was a bigger bird. Oh. Xin Ying's eyes narrowed. What's it for? I heard that it has some special abilities. Hong Ming specially sent it to you to thank you for what happened last time. For me? Extra food? Lone Moon nodded. Ever since he sent Hong Ming and the others back to their plane, they would send some things over from time to time. But that plane had just been opened and there was really nothing special. This was the first time he saw a living creature. But he did not elaborate. What is this bird used for? Just as he was thinking, the bird on the table flapped its wings and suddenly flew up. It let out a crisp bird cry. It flew in a circle above the rear hall, and its body began to emit a white light. In the next moment, its long tail flapped, and with a flash of white light, something came crashing down from the sky, falling straight onto the table. A crack appeared on the surface of the table. The few of them looked down and saw that there was a fist-sized crystal-clear object on the table. There was light flowing inside and immortal chi overflowed. This was immortal stone. Lone Moon was shocked. He picked up the stone and saw that it was a supreme-grade immortal stone. This bird can actually drop immortal stones. Even I Ching looked at the bird in shock. This was practically a moving immortal stone vault. With it in the sect, there was no need to worry about a lack of immortal stones. Of course there was no shortage now. Hong Ming sure is generous. Satisfied, Lone Moon patted the bird that was lying back on the table. He smiled like the president of a bank. You even sent such a precious bird here. And what a sensible god. Wow, Xining tugged at the bird's feathers curiously. So, can it be eaten? Lone Moon, I Ching, can you think of anything other than eating? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her and picked up the bird. This is a bird that can produce immortal stones. Can it be eaten? Can't I eat those that produce immortal stones? The meat was clearly quite fragrant. You're wasting it. Of course he had to keep the immortal stone first. It would be such a waste to eat it just like that. Besides, you've eaten 6 meals today. 6. Was there really that many? Xining stared blankly at the bird in his hand. But it looked really delicious. Is the immortal stone that important? Nonsense. What are you going to eat and drink if you don't have immortal stones? Lone Moon dispelled her desire to eat seriously. This is a supreme-grade immortal stone. The immortal chi inside is the purest. The disciples in the sect can directly absorb the immortal chi inside when they cultivate. It's very beneficial to their cultivation. If not, they can exchange it for something else. Is that so? Xin Ying's eyes narrowed. Something flashed across her eyes. She said slowly, but this stone, wasn't it that bird pooped out from that thing? Isn't it a little unhygienic to absorb what it pooped out? Also, you used the thing it pooped out to exchange for food and drink. Then, shut up. Lone Moon's face turned green. If she continued, he was going to vomit. Why did a good thing become completely different when it came out of her mouth? He suddenly felt that the immortal stone in his hand was burning. Here, here. He shoved the bird over. Add more food, all right? Was there a need to go so far just for food? Chef. Xining was delighted. She turned and shoved the bird to I Ching. Spicy chicken. The insanely spicy kind. Yes, master. No problem, master. Lone Moon. F*** King retard. A while later. Father Nyo, where you going? Wash my hands. He suddenly felt that his hands smelled like bird poop. Shining then sat up straight. It was rare that she took the initiative to set up the plates. She held a pair of chopsticks in one hand and looked like a hungry ghost waiting for dinner. The corner of Loneman's mouth twitched. He could not be bothered with this foodie. He threw away the spirit stone in his hand and turned to the kitchen to wash his hands. At this time, there was already a dead bird lying on the chopping board. All he felt was a lump in his chest. His heart hurt. My money printing machine. He silently looked away. He quickly washed his hands and walked out. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve. When he went out, Shining still maintained the same posture. Only her eyes were narrowed. She did not look as energetic as before. Furishin. Lone Moon waved his hand. Seeing that she did not respond, he could not help but push her. It's not dark yet. Why are you sleepy? Not eating the bird anymore? Shining turned to look at him. Her eyes were misty. It was as if she only heard what he said after a while. I'm not eating anymore. Holy shit, why didn't you say so earlier? Her feathers were plucked out. You freaking did it on purpose. Are you alright? Lone Moon then realized that something was wrong with her. What's wrong? Why are you like this? What's wrong? Father Nyo. I want to discuss something with you. What is it? Her eyes became even more misty. She looked like she was going to fall asleep the next moment. I might need to hibernate for a while. What hibernate? There is no winter in the heavenly palace. What exactly happened to you? Lone Moon panicked. Suddenly he thought of something. His heart tightened. Is it because of the plane splitting last time? Are you? I'm a little sleepy. I just want to sleep. Shining tilted her head. She did not answer him directly. Just that. I'll sleep a little longer. His heart sank. How long? Quite a long time. Lone Moon clenched his fists by his side. He took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He looked straight into her eyes and said word by word, I'll just ask one thing. Tell me honestly. You will be fine. Shining was stunned for a moment. A moment later, she nodded heavily. Of course. That's good. She suddenly tapped on her wristband. A light screen appeared. She operated something lazily. During this period of time, I will seal all the plane passages. Do not open them. Also, she stopped mid-sentence. Her tone changed. Leave that bird for me. I'll eat it when I wake up. Who cares about the bird now? Lone Moon was getting more anxious. Tell me first. What can we do to help? He tried hard to calm himself down. He turned toward the kitchen and shouted, Chef. I Ching just walked out of the kitchen. It'll be ready soon. Master I. Shining seemed to finally be unable to hold on. Her body swayed and she fell to the side. With a clang, the dishes in her hands spilled all over the floor. The blood drained from her face instantly. She was as white as snow. Master. Chapter 400. Master. I Ching called out a few times and realized that the person in his arms was not responding at all. His face turned even paler and even his hands began to tremble slightly. He subconsciously conjured a seal and transferred his god power. Blue light appeared around him and large amounts of god power flowed continuously towards Shining. Chef, what you're doing is useless. She's not a cultivator even if you give her. Holy shit. Do you want to die? Seeing that he was even about to use his inner core, Lone Moon was shocked and immediately pulled him back. Get out of my way. I Ching waved his hand away, his eyes red and filled with madness. Chef, calm down. Lone Moon said in a low voice. Shining just said that she's only in a deep sleep temporarily, she'll wake up. I Ching faltered, the crazy aura around him stopped. He turned around and asked hoarsely. How long? Lone Moon lowered his head and clenched his fists. She didn't say, but since she said she's fine, then she must be fine. His expression darkened and he finally calmed down. The red in his eyes also slowly faded, but he hugged the person in his arms even tighter, as if she would disappear if he was not careful. She's not doing well these days, you should have noticed it long ago, Lone Moon continued. She didn't say it, perhaps because it's useless to say it, we can't help it all, it would only make us more worried. She's a manager, some things we might not understand at all, you have to believe in your master, she. Manager. He suddenly interrupted Lone Moon as if thinking of something, his eyes widened as if grasping at the last shred of hope, and he suddenly hugged the person up. Yes, we can find a manager. What are you doing? Lone Moon was stunned. What did he mean? Let's go to the other world, he said anxiously. Xinjing, she's a manager too, she must have a way. That's right, Lone Moon reacted too, he almost forgot about that big boss. He immediately conjured a seal to open a passage to the Divine Realm space. Go from the Divine Realm, it's faster there. The two quickly returned under the starry sky. Lone Moon was just about to open the plane passage when the next moment, his face paled. Huh? Why is there no reaction? He tried a few more times but it still didn't work, he couldn't even touch the plane border. The planar channel can't be opened. I Ching's expression darkened. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a sword Dao and said, then let's charge forward. It wasn't the first time anyway. Don't mess around. Lone Moon panicked and immediately pulled her back. She almost lost her life the last time and she still wanted to do it again. Oh yes, Xining just said that she sealed all the plane passages. She must have her reasons for doing this. If you forcefully open it, you might end up harming her instead. I Ching retracted his sword and clenched his fists tightly. Then what should we do? Lone Moon fell silent. He clenched the flute in his hand tightly. After thinking for a while, he said, since we can't go over, maybe the other side can come over. Xinjing is also a manager, she should have a way. He suddenly thought of something and tapped on the wristband. A light screen popped up in front of him. As he operated it, he said, I remember that the manual of this wristband says that I can directly contact the other plane. He carefully scanned the light screen and finally found a red, quiet icon in the lower right corner. Found it? His expression lit up and he immediately tapped on that icon. In the next moment, a call interface popped up, accompanied by a calling sound. The other side picked up very quickly. Almost at the instant the ringtone rang, the call was connected. A familiar figure immediately appeared on the screen. Little Ing, why are you free? Xinjing's voice paused. The smile on her face turned cold. Why is it you, you little bastard? She frowned. Why did you suddenly contact me? Where's my little Ing? Elder sister Jing, Xining? Lone Moon then stepped aside, revealing I Ching who was carrying someone behind him. Xinjing's expression darkened. It was as if a cold wind had swept past. Her gaze was like a knife piercing the two. What happened? Why did she suddenly enter a dormant period? We're not sure either. Lone Moon shook his head. She didn't tell us the reason. She just suddenly said that she wanted to hibernate for a period of time. I knew something would definitely happen. I told her long ago not to receive any planes, but she just wouldn't listen. She's been so stubborn since she was young. Xinjing stood up and paced back and forth anxiously. After a while, she seemed to have thought of something. Her gaze became even colder as she looked at the two. That's not right. She has 2 portions of plane power on her. Unless she encountered a huge consumption, she would not enter a dormant period. What did she do before? Lone Moon was stunned. Then he answered, she repaired hundreds of plane cracks before and opened up a new plane. What? The person on the screen stiffened. Her body trembled. The surrounding aura suddenly became terrifying. It was as if something was about to burst out. The hands by her side were clenched tightly. Even through the light screen she could feel a huge pressure covering the sky and earth. Even the entire space of the Divine Realm was shaking. They heard a few faint cracking sounds. The originally pitch-black starry sky began to crack from all sides of the light screen. It was as if the Divine Realm was about to be torn apart. The cracks extended in all directions. Open. Plane? In the next moment, monstrous anger exploded from her body. It was as if a raging fire was burning around her. I'll kill you 2 bastards. Boss. Kai Tian suddenly appeared in the screen. He grabbed the raging manager. Calm down, calm down. You release your power so casually. It will create many plane cracks. You must calm down. Get lost. She kicked the person beside her. The sky was full of murderous intent. The person who had always been calm suddenly exploded. Little Ing has already bound a plane. How dare you let her open up a new plane? Are you idiots? Why didn't you stop her? I'm going to kill them. I must kill them. If they hadn't abducted her little Ing, would things have turned out like this? Boss. Kai Tian immediately crawled back and hugged her leg tightly. The passage there has been sealed. You can't go through. You 2 bastards. Hurry up and open the passage for me. Don't think that everything will be fine. If something happens to little Ing, there will be no need for your plane to exist. Boss, if we force a breakthrough it will affect Xining too. Xinjing paused. Then she calmed down. Even the few cracks in the divine realm stopped extending. After a while she took a deep breath. She looked at Lone Moon and I Ching with even colder eyes. It was as if she was looking at two dead people. Lone Moon felt a wave of coldness hit him. She really wanted to kill them. Yet I Ching looked down at the person in his arms. He put her down carefully. He turned and knelt down in Xinjing's direction. Senior Xin, it is true that we did not protect Master well. I Ching is at Senior's disposal. But Master's condition is unknown now. I hope that Senior can tell me how to wake Master up on account of our sisterhood. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.